just disappear. Angie, where will it lead us from here? Where no loving in our souls, and no money in our coats. Oh, you can't say we're satisfied, Angie. You can't say we never tried. Still taste sweet. Oh, but I hate that sadness in your eyes. Hey, Angie, oh, my pretty Angie. Oh, ain't it time that we've said goodbye? Oh, with no loving in our souls and no money. You can't say you were satisfied. And Angie, oh, I still love you. I love you, baby. And everywhere I look, I see your eyes. Oh, there ain't a woman that comes close to you, my Angie. And come on, baby. Come on, dry those eyes. Hey, Angie, oh, my pretty Angie. Ain't it good to be alive? And Angie, you can't say we never tried.
And now, talking IT with Glenn and me.
I have a whole bag of right here with your name on it.
Oh, is it on fire?
No. There you are. Hello.
You know, I cannot hear the Rolling Stones version of that anymore. That
True.
has become my Angie.
That is the version, that's right. You know, there is the definitive version, and that's just the one that comes to mind when you hear it, and that is for sure. It always brings a smile, too.
Yeah, that one makes me feel good.
Yep.
I love how she did that.
Definitely. And we're back with another episode today. Talking shh with Glenn and Tony. And we have many things on the schedule today. We have a couple of videos to watch. We've got a couple of theories to go over. We're doing updates on the goatee. See?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. I think I got another inch since last week.
Nah, there you go. That's growing faster than mine then, for sure. Mine, you can.
I'm taking the Jason Jacobs beard approach.
Let it happen. That's the main approach. For me, it's more.
The more metal I listen to, I think the faster it grows.
There you go. That works. For me, it's like you can just barely tell that I have a beard from a distance. I mean, definitely not the bottom because it's so white, but up here, kind of a little.
You're getting a nice blend. You got that salt and pepper thing going.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We'll see. I'll probably get sick of it soon and get rid of it. But in the meantime, I do always enjoy pondering.
Well,
It's good to have a beard for that.
It's those transitional moments where it starts to grow under the neck and it gets itchy.
Sure.
The last couple of weeks, I finally got past that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the thing with with just the goatee is I'm usually getting rid of everything down from there anyway. So like it's all clean down here. So like the goatee could be 4 feet long, and it would still just be this little handful right here, and it wouldn't be any of the neck. So I wouldn't get that tuck under effect. But when I did grow the full beard out, it definitely wanted to go out more than it wanted to go down. But I could sense that right after a couple months in, I would say probably 2 to 3 months in on growing it, and it was getting to where it was long enough for gravity to tell it, okay, time to go down, and it was going to start going down for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for gravity to take effect, and my sides will not grow.
Yeah. Well, like Jason was saying, it's like getting curly. Like if you were to straighten out the hairs, like they've grown a lot more than you think they have. But like in his case, they're just, they're all kinky or curly, so to speak. Whereas some people, they grow that ZZ top and it just comes straight down. So mine, I think, was more straight. So like once it gets past a certain distance, it would just go straight down.
I dream of the day I get a ZZ top.
See, I'm thinking more the Kung Fu Master look, like the just the goatee, but like everything in the goatee happens to be like 3 feet long.
Oh, if I could get one of those straight, like Fu Manchu.
Yeah.
I'd do that too.
Or put the Viking thing in the beard, like right down here, like they braid the beard going down.
I have done that.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Nice. Yeah, the beard, braid in the beard, mine has never gotten quite long enough for that. I did have the braid in the back though, and that looked kind of silly. So that was there was not enough hair to make a full blown ponytail back there for sure.
Oh, Glenn had a ponytail. I wish we had a picture.
Oh yeah, picture. I'm pretty sure there are some out there, but there's at least one from when I was, let's say, probably 14, but like full on mullet, like full on, short on top, but like just a little rat tail in back, probably, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 inches long or whatever back there, and not all the hair in the back, but just like the middle. It was ridiculous.
Yeah,
But it was one of those things.
I went through the mullet phase back with Achy Breaky Heart. My mom
Oh, God.
she loved Billy Ray Cyrus. And
Oh man.
it was the only time she didn't care about me having long hair. She's like, "Oh, your hair looks like Billy Ray Cyrus."
Yep. Hey, I mean, not a bad
I'm
look
like,
to look
"No,
after.
Ma, no, I don't want to be Billy Ray. I want to be Eddie Van Halen."
Yeah. She's like, but you need a louder looking guitar then. Because he has a loud looking guitar, for sure.
And I need to learn to play.
That's true. And he did. He spent a lot of time doing that. And it showed.
Yeah,
It's one of those
rest
things.
in peace, Eddie.
Indeed. Miss him already. It's one of those things, man. Unique sounds.
Last week we were mentioning one of the artists we're going to be talking about tonight over on YouTube as we hunt for YouTube resources for our Talkin' IT YouTube. One of the artists we're going to be talking about over on YouTube tonight, Nari Soul, captured my attention from the first video you played of her.
Indeed.
And she is a phenomenal resource for learning music theory from a researcher's approach.
Yep. This is her YouTube page here. Lots of great stuff in here, whether it's ways to play songs in different styles, in the style of different composers, or whether it's really homing in on how to sound like a particular composer, like Mozart, for example, or Beethoven, or whether it's certain other styles of music, like bebop digested by a classical musician. There's just a lot of really good subjects in there, and the videos were really, each of them, in their own ways, really brought a lot of information to light for me. There's a bunch of shorts that she's added since the last time I'd looked also. So a lot of good stuff. We've picked out a couple of them for today, and we could look at them in any order that we like, but let's see. How about a quick short one here? This is a quick short one about funk as digested by a classical musician.
What
So
I
it's
really like about her is, she comes at it from a classical training approach, but she's very open-minded with her music analysis.
Indeed. And that's the thing, is the approach, like you said, the approach that she takes going into it is definitely very cool, and definitely has that rawness to it, where you're seeing, this is kind of, she's showing you where she, studied as a classical musician, and what that, let's say, musical upbringing brings to everything that she, digests as other styles that she's looking at, which is really cool, because she's looking at it through that lens, which I really like. And let me just share the other way here so that we get a good version of that. And that way, we'll take a look at that one. We'll say that was the funk one I mentioned first, right? So let's see. There. And if we bring that one in. Yeah. Let me know how the audio is here. Got it just about half.
Hello everyone, my name's Nari, and as a continuation of these pocket pieces, I wrote influenced by the funk genre this week. Thank you to Paul for suggesting this idea. As a clinician, I wasn't exposed to funk music until very recently, so first I had to spend some time deliberately listening to some recordings. Here are a few things I took a mental note of. There is a very strong emphasis on the downbeat. The overall subdivision of the pulse is made up of even sets of notes instead of odd. Oftentimes, a short pattern made up of an odd number of notes is repeated and scattered over this pulse. And lastly, the harmonic direction generally seems to want to sit comfortably in its place without moving in too many directions. I tried to keep all of these things in mind for my piece, but I wasn't so strict about keeping a steady pulse, a form, and was only able to try to imitate the sort of attitude that leads to an authentic groove. Before we move on, here are some additional remarks. First of all, last minute, I decided not to go with the clavinet sound, but with the Wurlitzer sound with the guppy effect, the wah effect. And I did that because I'm not used to the clavinet sound, and I'm not used to the way it feels and sounds. And I was having trouble hearing certain pitches the way I wanted them to sound with the clavinet sound. I think it's just a skill and a touch that I just haven't acquired yet. The type of strokes that you need to do to get that slap sound, I'm not familiar with, and it was just hard for me to do. Also, sustained notes, I didn't like how it sounded with the clavinet. I much preferred the Wurlitzer. And quite simply, I just preferred the Wurlitzer sound for this one. Also, because I'm very inexperienced when it comes to funk music and new to the genre, it's just a bit awkward for me to improvise some bits, because I'm just unfamiliar with that kind of style where you're prioritizing rhythm and focused on the groove, and there's just this attitude that I'm very unfamiliar with. So that was a challenge, but also very fun because it was a learning experience. And in terms of filming, it was very fun because, first of all, I was at the park with Bobby, and I'm never at the park, so it was a nice experience. But it was pretty challenging because of a few things. The first thing was the keyboard setup, because I should have brought something to elevate my keyboard, but because it was near the ground, I ended up putting a towel there, but it was still low. Because it was low, it was really hard to play. The second thing is that there were quite a few people that kept walking by and asking me questions or talking to me. Which happens pretty often when I do these videos, but not as often as today. Yeah. Okay, now here's the other thing. If you're using a tripod... Also, I was having some battery issues with the keyboard today. Usually I put in a fresh set of batteries before I do something like this, but today I just didn't. And the thing about the keyboard is that you can't tell when the battery's low. The only signal it gives you is that maybe 5 minutes before it's done, it'll start to glitch, and that was happening. Luckily, I got in a few more takes before the keyboard died, but that was a little bit of a concern. It was my fault. I should have put in a fresh set of batteries. And now here's the final piece. Thank you. 마비 데리고 공원에 갔지. 영상 찍고.
친구들하고 뭐 안 먹고?
아니, 친구들이랑 오늘 친구들이 없어요.
Yeah, she's definitely got a lot of really great stuff with that. And what I really like about the style like that is it's such a minimal keyboard too. It's such a small device, and being able to get a really cool sound like that just has so much to do with the percussive nature. And I also like that she was, acknowledging that it's not really her style, or not really her, there were aspects of it that were difficult for her, and it's good for her to, to acknowledge that, those were things that she was, having struggles with as she was working on.
Going from classical to funk is a big paradigm shift for a composer like her. Classical doesn't have a lot of funk in it. Funk is more of a 20th century groove that took styles from classical and slapped them up. And her choice of instrument, she originally was going to go with the clavi, which is a great one for funk on the bass side, but choosing to go with the Wurlitzer for the highs and mids was a good move on her part. As a keyboardist, the Wurlitzer is great for funk.
Yeah, definitely love that.
And
the Wurlitzer, anything
Casio
with
had a nice Wurlitzer.
for sure. And whether it's the Wurlitzer or whether you get a good Leslie sound, you get that kind of rotating cab sound to it. There's a number of different ways to get it, but if you can get that kind of sound, it's great. And like she was saying, as far as I don't know if it's the technique, the slap technique that she's talking about, needing for that clav sound to work out the way she wants. And I don't know if it would work with that patch she was using even. It might be that clav that she's using was a good estimate of a clav, but in order to get the actual sound she was looking for, it's more in the technique of how you're hitting, and you'd have to be hitting it on a real clav to get that kind of sound. That would be my guess.
Yeah, and trying to get that, that rotary sound, that's actually still tricky on synths. They simulate rotary speakers and things like that, but they never do it exactly like the original instruments. The Leslies on synth, they're close, but if you can play on a real one, you'll hear the difference.
Right.
There's a natural fluctuation that goes on that you really can't simulate on the keyboard side.
Let me see something here. I think there might be a little bit of a whoosh in the background. I'm not sure if it's my air conditioner or not. I'm just going to mute this for a second. Yeah, I'm not sure. Still might be there a little bit.
Might be over here. You getting it now?
Still a little bit, but not bad. Matter of fact, it might even be my keyboard being plugged in. Hang on, let me do something else here. Meantime, let me check that.
Your keyboard wants to be a Wurlitzer. It's weird.
It does. I think it's on strings and piano right now, and let's see the volume. But if I turn that off.
Yep, something does go away.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. I have that one set too hot.
You're
No
hot,
big deal.
Glenn.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Got to check the Meticulous also after but if I kill it and bring it back, sometimes you have to do something to get the relaunch it to get it to go, but it looks like it's okay now. Excellent. But I can also bring that little whoosh down. Also, I think it could be that we need to get your volume up a little bit. I think they're saying that I'm a little bit louder than you, but I mean, I tend to be a bit louder than you anyway, so that might just be that.
Well, I'll try to lean in a little more. If I turn up my gain, you'll hear my dryer.
There you are. Nice. That works though. But welcome to everybody in the chat. It's good to see everybody. We're always here doing our stuff on Thursdays. We've got some keyboard stuff going on. We're looking at a couple different videos. That was one, like we said, from Nari, and she's got, like we said, great material. Some on one of the ones that we watched, I guess it was a couple months ago maybe even, about emotion, where it has to do with the getting across the emotions of music by using minor things for this, major things for that, for very basic amounts of emotion, and then different kinds of nuances you can add to get other types of emotion in there. If you get suspense or mystery, that kind of thing. Some videos just really good on that sort of thing, as well as on improvisation, which, again, for a classical musician is one of the things that's usually outside of their lane, where classical is usually very focused on playing what's on the page rather than making up something new. Of course, composing for classical is entirely different. That is making up something new. But, for most of what people are doing with classical, many classical musicians that I've talked to in the past, and myself learning classical when I was younger, it was never about improvisation. It was always about playing this piece in a certain way and things to learn from each piece that I never really fully appreciated at the time. That you're learning certain things with each piece that are adding to your style, much like your influences are adding to your style. If you listen to a lot of Eddie Van Halen, like you said, and you're playing guitar, you're gonna probably try to play that way or have that as a large influence in what you're working on. There we are.
And we can find her at, you said it's Nari.
Nari, Nahre. And her last name is Sol, S-O-L.
What we're going to do is we're going to add her to our channel list.
Yes, indeed. The second one. The second one's her channel, I think. Yep.
Is this it?
Yep. Excellent.
Yes. Like, share, subscribe, Nari.
Yes, indeed. Like I said, excellent resource. And we're building our little list there of subscriptions on the left. We're just getting that YouTube channel started, so it's not a lot of subscriptions yet, but we are working our way through as we go through things.
524,000.
Yes, indeed.
There you go.
And that's 3 or 4 more than we have, but we're getting there.
We're drinking milk.
We're drinking our milk, growing up big and strong. But the idea is to find and to highlight excellent resources like this on the web. And everything I've seen by her is fantastic. And it's, again, different styles, different techniques. It doesn't have to get heavy into theory. It can be very light on theory, but heavy on content, where it's just giving you something to think about, something to work on, something to work into your practice routine. And good practice routine stuff as well.
And she actually talks about composition and, arrangement, the emotion of music, the kinds of things you don't necessarily find on a lot of the music resources that's on YouTube. A lot of them will just go straight to theory or, technique, but they don't tend to talk about composition and arrangement. A lot of times that seems to get lost these days in the music making.
Yeah, it's more secondary in their thoughts as opposed to the actual notes, and people spend a lot of time on effects as well. And you would think that with effects like that, you might, you'd see more focus on that sort of a thing. But a lot of times they get really tunnel vision onto a particular effect or a particular channel, and it's not about the overall sound or the overall mix that's happening.
Yeah, and look, she's got genre exploring. This is something I wish all musicians would do more of.
Yeah.
I want to take a look at her list here.
Yep. I think one of them was Argentinian Tango, and I think actually 2 of the ones I was looking at I pulled from there. The one was the funk one we looked at. One was about autumn leaves in a number of different styles, in the style of 5 or 7 different composers.
Oh, I remember this one, Digested as a Classical Musician. That was a great one.
Yeah. That's actually that's a series of them. There's a playlist probably for that specifically, where Argentinian Tango as digested by, or bebop as digested by, or blues, and there's like several different styles that she just dives into from her perspective, and that's what she really likes, or that's what I really like in what we're looking at there.
And
A lot of
this
different
one-
options.
This one really goes to the new challenges that Angie's been doing, like the pop to metal. We're going to be doing acoustic punk,
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Acoustic to punk.
reimagining pop in different genres.
Yep, that's one of the videos I picked out. Let me mute.
Is that music coming through, Glenn? Is the music coming through for you?
It started coming through at the beginning, then it cut out, and then it was out for a little while, and then it just came back in. So it's almost as though if you're muting yourself, you're muting the music.
Yeah.
But I could also just run it from here if that makes it better.
Yeah, I will.
I have that
because,
particular song.
My system audio is tied to my mixer, so
Right.
I actually couldn't share sound there. Otherwise, it would have got the loop that we had last time.
Sure. Okay, I have that song loaded currently, so let me do this
Pull
here.
that off. I love the variation she's doing on that Louis Capaldi song.
Yep. And that's the pop song reimagined in 5 style. Someone You Loved, right?
Yep.
Cool. Yep, that's this one here. And again, let me know if the volume's good on your end there, and I'm going to mute while we do it.
Yep, sounds beautiful.
I love the way she highlights what she's doing in the text here.
I agree. I love how she put the
There we go.
descriptions, as she was trying the different
Hmm.
techniques. Those little descriptions really help to see what some of those techniques are. I saw one in there, filigree.
Yep.
What's filigree?
Yep. Filigree.
It's one I've heard in musical terms,
Basically,
but
it was the. I think it has to do with the kind of the style, the flamboyance, let's say, of the line, the way that it's coming across.
yeah, well, she was rolling back.
It could be
real
something more
fast.
specific than that, though, as I'd have to see.
She was rolling back real fast.
Because she was just talking about, she went from chromatic lines. She went from a chromatic line to the filigree. So she was, at first, she was going, da-na-na-na-na, like very gently. And then it was more of a quicker, almost arpeggiating, but not quite.
And then she
to
went
get
to a
down.
trill.
So I would have to check on that.
She went from that
and then
to
to a
the
trill,
trill,
correct.
which that
Yep.
being able to hear when it comes to understanding those kind of musical techniques, hearing them as you're seeing those words really kind of burns it in your brain what the sound is.
Hmm. Exactly. And that's why seeing each of those, and again, trying to describe it as it's going would be, too many words to try to talk about each section as she's doing it. And it would be very confusing if she was trying to play while talking about it. But by throwing it in as the text there, she's just highlighting or articulating what it is that makes the song come across that way, whether it's something about the style or whether it's something about the notes she's using, the scales, the arpeggios, even just the timing or the tapering off at the end, that kind of self-fade out kind of thing. Like all of those kinds of things all really add to the... they're all things that you wouldn't necessarily put into things that you're composing. You're thinking more about notes and chords and what instruments are playing what, but you're not thinking necessarily about things like that. But it's good things to think about when you're writing music, for sure.
And like you said, that would be very difficult, say, to show that in a class while you're
Right.
trying to describe and play. But the beauty of some of these YouTube resources that we look at, they do a really great job of just injecting that information unobtrusively. Like you get to really hear the sound that you're supposed to be hearing, and you can just kind of see what's going on and connect it.
Yep. Exactly.
It makes the learning
again,
process so much faster.
Yeah. And it helps just, again, to be able to see all the different things all kind of thrown at you at once. And it's not like you have to memorize all of them as you see them, but it's kind of as you see them, you're hearing them, so you're making that connection. And then as you think about it later, as you think about each of those, different tools or articulations that were used as she was doing them, you can use them to highlight or to, add spice to stuff that you're doing already.
The
Very cool.
spice.
The spice. Always have to have the spice in there.
Yeah, these days all music gets spicy.
Yep. Indeed. I like the one where she was in the park with her dog too, and everybody's coming up and talking to her when she's trying to film. It's like you got when you're filming, if your camera, even if it's on a tripod or whatever, people that are interested in what you're doing, so they will come up and just start
especially
talking
if you're
to you.
if you're playing, like say out in the park with a keyboard, it's only a matter of time before you're going to get some people kind of gathering around. It's like the guitarist who's just like playing, on the front steps somewhere in New York with a hat in front of him, and before you know it, there's a whole crowd.
Yep. Exactly. Or the guy could even, instead of a guitar, he could just have a bunch of PVC pipes and play them with his sandals. Remember that guy?
I have seen that. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, it doesn't have to be an expensive guitar. It could be something that you made yourself. It's all about what you do with it, what you make with it. If you can reproduce sounds or make sounds that are original, that people enjoy, by all means, make your own instrument and make it how you like it.
Yeah, if you
One of the
really
things,
if you really have a unique instrument that people haven't seen, like that PVC pipe guy,
Yeah.
of course people are going to gather around like, what the hell, that sound's coming out of that. That's when I first saw it, that if I had been there, I would have been going towards that just because of the sound that it was doing. And then
even from like two streets over.
Yeah,
Two streets over, you'd be like, wait, it sounds like it's coming from over there. Let's go that way.
And when you see what he's actually doing it on, your
Yep.
brain's connecting like, oh my God, he's getting that kind of sound out of pipes.
We'll have to find a video of that at some point. Pipe guy, I remember, is what I remember from that. I want to say it was New Zealand, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it was over in that part of the world, as opposed to being like, Atlanta or, LA or whatever. I think it was definitely over there.
Yeah, Ann showed me one back when we first started. A guy from over in Pennsylvania who had found this it looked like something out of like a playground, monkey bars, except it was like a metal sculpture with all sorts of pipes and things, and the guy was just like tapping different parts of it and finding all sorts of new sound.
Nice. That's the way to do it. Again, it doesn't have to be a specific instrument. It could be a board with a string nailed to it or whatever.
This
Whatever you
wasn't
can use
even
to
an
make
instrument. This was
Yeah.
a metal monstrosity, but he turned it.
But it
into
makes
an
certain
instrument.
noises. Yep. What I liked, I think I mentioned it once before, was like the high tension metal lines they have connected to like telephone poles or whatever. It's like a guy wire, I guess I would call it, where it's just basically keeping it from blowing over or whatever. Doesn't carry electricity. It's just basically a metal, cable to keep it from falling over. But if you were to hit it just gently with a piece of metal, it sounds like a laser fire. It's like choo, choo, choo. So you could just sit there like drumsticks, and it's like a laser fight. You get some really cool sounds out of stuff like that.
Yeah, see,
All because of-
drummers are the lucky ones because you can technically bang on just about anything and turn it into an instrument.
Absolutely. Gotta love that about drums and percussion, for that matter. Just being able to, tap something rhythmically, whether it, and I've seen people do it on a guitar also, though, where you see some people who have a very percussive style, where again they're trying to essentially sit in as the drummer for the band, but they're doing it from their guitar, just like slapping and bumping the guitar in certain ways to get that.
Just a little tap on an acoustic, like more than words.
Yep. Yep. And another one would be when we go to any song, if it all the instruments break out and you just have a vocal part, and a lot of times the drums will just keep a little rhythm going. A lot of times if I'm playing bass, I'll just sit there and have, mute the strings completely with both hands and then just tap with one hand or the other, doop, 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 because then you don't get a specific note, but you're just getting a percussive kind of a thump to try to keep everybody in the band, on the same timing. So it just kind of helps keep everything together there.
Be the metronome.
Yeah, kind of. And you could get fancier if you want to, and that's where you can get twice as fast as you thought you could by using both hands. Because if you have both hands just kind of flat on the strings, in their usual positions in the opposite directions, whatever, but just both flat on the strings, you can go thwap, thwap, bap, bap, like one hand and then the other. And since as long as one hand is always on the strings, that's keeping it muted, and the other hand can reach back and slap it and then switch.
Yeah, kind of get that
faster.
Kick snare feel.
Yep, exactly. And one hand is higher up on the strings because where you're plucking is where one hand is kind of situated, and the other hand is down where you're usually fretting. So you will get a slightly different sound from each of them. So one will be higher than the other, and you can work that in and get that same kind of percussion thing as if you had two congas in front of you or two bongos or whatever. Diggy 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 diggy. One higher and one lower. Be able to bounce back and forth.
Bongos are like next on my list of toys to get.
Nice. That's a good one because they're small, they're fun, they don't take up a lot of space, but it is a drum style instrument, so it is easy for.
Well, it's one of the few percussion instruments that I think hands I'm pretty good with. Mm-hmm. Sticks is where I don't have the stick technique to be happy with my drumming.
You might not want to be playing bongos at 4 a.m. though at the house. Just saying, it might not be appreciated.
They don't make headphones for bongos.
Exactly. You did talk about one though that was a kind of a drum input device. It almost reminded me of a hang drum, I guess, but like an electronic input device where you could be hitting it and you hit it at different areas and you'll get different drum sounds. We'll have to look into that one at one point. It was a hardware controller for a drummer or percussion.
There is one that's kind of rounded. And,
right, that one.
It has pads almost like a clock. It has little pads all the way around. Mm-hmm. And basically people use their thumbs on the outside pads, and in the middle there's a giant pad. And it's a MIDI controller, but it's for percussionists. And when you get a good steel drum sound running through it, it's incredible what people can do with that.
Nice. Seeing if I had one up here. I had a few. There's mostly pads up there, sequencers, synth pads. I do remember that there's the drum sets themselves. It has some weird ones in them. Triangles are good though.
And that is something that we'd like to explore more. If any of you out there use an unusual MIDI controller, like these drum pads or the MIDI saxophone that Roland has, anything like that.
The Aerophone.
I'd love to hear of who on BandLab is using these kinds of controllers, because I know some of you are out there.
Indeed. I think the one I was using was a strings piano because that had a good, you get that percussive front from the piano, and if you just kind of lean in, you get the strings. Although this one doesn't have as much of the strings to it. The other one, this one probably did. Yeah, that's more strings. I do like that one. It's a good sound. Now, I think we had some BandLab music to get into tonight as well, but we might do that soon, or we might do that a little bit later.
Yeah,
We'll have to
actually,
check on that, but
I do have this tune. I don't know if there's bongos in this, speaking of, but this one has a very unique flavor of like Latin pop. You know, it's from our buddy Noiser 2.
nice. Yeah.
TOO Noiser.
Yep. Noiser as well.
The other Noiser. And he sent me this one a couple of days ago, and this guy's voice, Noah, like just got my attention right off the bat. Definitely want to hear more.
Very cool. I'm going to go ahead and mute when you bring it up, just so we don't get any loop and sound issues there.
Sa hinaba-haba ng pila, alam mo naman na ako yung nauna. Pero sabi mo, friends lang muna. I'm willing to wait kapag handa ka na talaga. Pinaghintay tapos nalaman ko mayroon ka na palang jowa na iba. Di mo daw sinasadya na mahulog sa kanya. Mayroon ka na palang jowa na iba. Ano ba ang meron siya? Nasa akin ay wala. Yeah. Siya ba yung tipong manloloko? Hindi marunong magseryoso. Wala yan kung binili mo ako. At nangako tayo sa isa't isa. I'm willing to wait kapag handa ka na talaga. Pinaghintay tapos nalaman ko mayroon ka na palang jowa na iba. Di mo daw sinasadya na mahulog sa kanya. Mayroon ka na palang jowa na iba. Ano ba ang meron siya? Nasa akin ay wala. Yeah. Merong jowa na pala. Mayroon na palang jowa. Merong jowa na pala. Pinaghintay tapos nalaman kong may suot na singsing. Mayroon ka na palang jowa na iba. Di mo daw sinasadya na mahulog sa kanya. Mayroon ka jowa na iba. Ano ba ang meron siya na akin ay wala?
beautiful voice, like you said. Yeah, beautiful voice, like you said.
Yeah, those vocal layers that were going on there, and ooh, am I getting an echo?
I think so. I think so.
It's weird. It came from another machine. I don't know where the sound came out there. It happened when I was switching the camera. Must
I think it's because you're still sharing. I think it's because you're still sharing.
yeah, it routes the music. But real quick, what? Definitely worth checking out and hearing what he does with his voice. At Noah Raquel. And Noiser at silly_noiser.
Excellent.
Let's see if that fixes the sound.
Yep. Sounds like we're good. And I'm still coming through there.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, when I first heard that, I loved how they were using the snaps, for the percussion, just to keep that like constant mood. And then when the drums come in towards the end the way they do, it becomes that feel good music that, was building up all that time. And that last round becomes like a celebration of the song theme.
Yeah. Bringing it all back around. It's good composition.
He did a fantastic job of layering Noah's vocal track to get that kind of choral sound behind his.
Definitely.
Always impressed with his music production.
Indeed. A lot of times with the vocals like that, it's about, like you said, the layering. It's about how thick you're making it. It's about where you're spreading it in the field. All of those things can have such an effect on what you're trying to put together. And if you're trying to have like the 4-part vocal harmonies, or if you're just trying to keep it to a regular, single vocal with some backings, all of those factors, they all factor in. There you go. A bigger Tony.
This camera might actually, it might actually keep up with me. It's funny when I use the iPhone, it doesn't end up going through the USB, so sometimes I see myself moving and talking. I'm like, wait a minute.
Didn't I say that 5 minutes ago?
Say that.
Like, who's this Tony guy? It's an imposter.
Hey,
Gotta
NJ.
watch out for that.
Hey, Anu, Blondie, if you guys want us to check out your tracks, I'm going to put in our BandLab account.
New rules.
Well, we're trying something different tonight, so if you guys want us to check it out, go give us a follow over there on BandLab, and we'll check out your song. We've got to build up our followers on our Talking Shh IT account.
Yep. Now, that was just recently started, right? That account there?
Yeah, it's about 2 weeks old since we started putting our episodes up on YouTube. I'll throw that link in there in a moment. And we've got a BandLab account now for the show. We've got a Twitch account, a YouTube account, even a Facebook account.
Getting them all covered. I love it. And we got a lot of episodes up there, like we said. It's over 60, I believe, 65 at this point.
Yeah, there's actually 3 more on their way as soon as I get a moment.
Indeed.
I just
excellent stuff.
I'm almost done editing the Minkley episode.
Nice.
I made it look pretty.
Excellent. Like you were saying, we got to look at that process again, because that's the kind of thing that I definitely want to check out more of. The video editing process and all of that, creation of the graphics and all. We'll have some fun with that stuff.
Yeah, and you'll be seeing with our season 2 stuff, we're evolving.
Yep.
We're on more platforms. We're making the videos party.
Doing some extras.
Turn Ange into a lion.
Rawr. Makes me laugh every time.
Oh, I've got a couple more lion videos.
Nice. We'll have to check them out some other time. Now, the other question is, we had a couple from Nare Soul, and we also had a couple from our buddy Jake, or actually I had one in particular from Jake, but it was about improvising on guitar. So we could do that either in a little while.
Jake is another one that like should be in our channel, our YouTube channel, friends. He's one of the first ones that we started looking at.
That's right. We had several of the videos that we've looked at for sure, and this one is one that I don't think that we've looked at before, because it's one that as I was watching it, it was kind of new things were kind of making sense to me, and it was about improvising in Mixolydian, and it's basically about starting off very simply and then just slowly kind of introducing slightly newer ideas or slightly different ideas to try to make it more fluid or more musical in your improvisation, but basically starting out from just a very basic skeletal structure and being able to have something come up and sound like a good solo just out of very little, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I like. He'll show you a progression that's very comfortable, nice and common, and then how to use those modal shifts to, as he would say, spice them up.
Yep. And that's the question, is we can do that. I think it's a bit of a longer video, so maybe we'll do like a part of it now, and then we'll jump back in and talk a little bit about it, and then we'll do the rest of it in a little bit after that. It might be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and with his instructions, it's nice to soak them in and chew on the knowledge.
Now his with it here, this is his main YouTube page, Signals Music Studio. And again, tons of good stuff here. He's got over 600,000 followers or subscribers as well there. Chord progressions in minor keys, rules for writing chords, voice leading, making music in 5 styles. So he'll take like one progression. That's another good one there, is like music in different styles by taking a particular numeric progression and then exploring it in different musical styles. He's got how to harmonize things, making scary sounds, just so many good things. One I was going to check out as well is a free rhythm course he was making, a rhythm guitar training course that he was going to put up there for free. So there's a lot of good resources.
He's got some courses, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have to explore some of those.
Yep, and for that I would even go to the playlists. I'm sure there's some that are more on the theory. Yep. Some on theory, some on harmonic minor, major, music production, just a whole bunch of different things.
And that's another thing.
Well broken out.
You want to remind yourself, a lot of these YouTube resources, you can find free lessons, free courses. Chris Lipe, one of the vocal teachers that we show every Tuesday, he gives free vocal lessons for those who sign up through his channel. These are the resources to start with.
And one of the biggest things for me is, as far as there are a lot of different places where you can go to get content on YouTube for learning, whether it's guitar or vocals or piano, it's about finding an instructor that you resonate with or that resonates with you. It's because you could check out 10 different ones or 20 different ones or 50 different ones, but you have to find one who seems genuine to you, seems like they speak your language in terms of the the level at which you're playing and the level at which they're presenting the material, because sometimes material is aiming for a very basic beginner level, and okay, here's a note that's G on a guitar, and they start working from there. Or they might start from, okay, this is a 1-4-6-5 in the key of F sharp. It's like different places to start, but both could have relevant information. Even if you're at a lower level or a higher level than what's being discussed, you might pick up nuggets anyway. That's some of the stuff that I like, is that you'll always, I like watching all of them, even the ones that seem like they might be more beginner than what I would normally watch, but sometimes I'll pick up little nuggets that I missed on my journey that, make things make sense. Things fall into place better after watching some of these. You could write a sea shanty.
He's pretty good at, his pace, whether he's doing something more at the beginner level or the more advanced stuff. His pace is always nice and steady. He doesn't shove the information, into your head, and he gives you a good explanation in the time to hear what he's trying to show you.
Another thing that he will do frequently is if it is a subject that needs more coverage, or if he says, if this sounds new to you, or if you're not familiar with how we're doing this, check out this video over here that I did on that subject. So he has like the deeper dive videos linked so that you can say, okay, if you're not sure how to use the minor pentatonic here, you can go to this video and check that out and then come back here. So he gives you good pathways if what he is covering is too far, or is too deep knowledge-wise or theory-wise. You can always jump to a different video that's more tailored to that level, or the basis. Here's the basis video that this is all built upon.
Yeah,
because knowledge is like that foundation.
He covers so much that anything he's talking about is interrelated to something he's already talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then the video itself that we were going to look at is this one here, which was on how to improvise solos in Mixolydian mode. And it is a guitar lesson, so it's not strictly for guitar, but
that's his website, right? SignalsMusicStudio.com. I think I have that bookmarked.
Yep, and that's his page there as well, Signals Music Studio on YouTube. A lot of good resources, like I said. And he's been working on that website for many years now. I mean, I remember seeing videos from this from years and years ago. So that's where an excellent resource and a lot of a good body of work that's there on the stuff there. Worth the subscription for sure.
Christ, he still looks like a kid.
Yeah, he does.
All these youngins.
Yep. All right, so let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and launch this. I think we got the volume still good from before. It's probably too high. So let's try that.
And talking about guitar solos and improvising leads. We could practice this using major pentatonic, but today I've chosen Mixolydian. Mixolydian is a very fun scale. It's got a very cool, unique, and I think it's way more interesting than your standard run-of-the-mill major stuff. So what I'm going to basically break down here for you is the process that I go through when I'm in a situation where I need to just make up leads on the fly. I'll tell you right now, some of the worst advice that I hear people say is to just feel it, to just do what feels good. And I think that's really bad advice for somebody who's a beginner, because if you get on your guitar and just try to sound good with no theory, with no guidelines of what's going to work and what isn't, it's going to take you a very, very long time to start sounding melodic, to start sounding in key, to start sounding good. So, I mean, you could do that. You could basically, carve out your own path and figure this thing out on your own. Or you could learn a few basic rules that'll save you literally years off of this entire process. So that's what I want to get you into here today, is a little bit of the theory, so that way you can find your bearings, you can have a good foundation on which you can build, and then maybe, once you've got some theory built up and you've got some places on your guitar that you're comfortable with, then you can start just feeling it and going by what feels good. But in my experience, you can't really get to that point of working intuitively until you really have some solid fundamentals down, okay? What I want to start off with is I just want to talk about the D Mixolydian scale. That's what we're going to be using to solo with. So here's the shape I've given you, all right? The D Mixolydian scale, I set it up as 3 notes per string. So I'm starting here on D, that's the 10th fret on my low string. And the scale goes as follows. All right? Now the first step for me using this scale to improvise is to literally go onto the jam track, and that's what I'm using here today. I'm using a jam track that's in D Mixolydian, and that's in the description. I recommend you open that up in the other tab or a different device and just try and play along. Everything that I'm showing you here, just try to play along with it on that other track, okay? What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going up and down that scale and just listening to how fast I can go. Can I do triplets? Can I do 16th notes? All right? And that'll be my groundwork for my improvisation. It's not going to sound great, but it will be in key and it will work. So as you listen, this will be very mechanical because it's just going to be going up and down notes. All right, but even then, it'll sound like a guitar solo, kind of, just not that inspired of a guitar solo. So you'll see me go up, you'll see me go down, all right? You won't see me doing a lot of skipping, all right? I don't want to do that yet. I don't want to be jumping around like that. Just for now, I want to get comfortable with the shape. What I also will do is repeat myself a lot. So I might do the same ascending run a few times in a row, just to kind of get your ear used to it. And that's going to be far more interesting than just randomly noodling up and down. Okay, so let's take a listen what it sounds like. I'm going to hit play on the jam track, and I'm just going to go up and down my D Mixolydian shape and do a little creative stuff as far as maybe stopping halfway through or, starting in a different spot. But I'm not going to do anything difficult, all right? Just up and down. Let's take a listen. 2, 3. I'll try and throw some 16th notes in there. All right. So I admit that wasn't the most emotional guitar solo, but hey, it worked. It was at least in key, and for at least me, that was a big step when I was finally able to sound in key with something like this. The next step is to start adding in some stuff that is actually for guitar players, stuff like hammer-ons, pull-offs, bends, slides. Those are going to be the things that make it sound more like a solo and less like this mechanical, just ascending through scales. So, for example, I could hammer on through every note of the scale, just picking the first note of every single string. I could do pull-offs down. One of the things I really like to do is I like to line up my fingers on any string and then pull off all the notes. So like right here, I've got 15, 14, and 12. I'm going to do one pick stroke and a pull-off, and then I'll follow it up with the next note on the next string. Just like that. So it's 4 notes total. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can think of it as 1 E and 1 E and 2 E and I really like that move. It's very, very easy to use, so I'm going to try and apply it. Also bending. If you see that there's a note, like in the shape right here, if you see that this note is only a half step next door, that's going to be an easy note to bend to. Right here, that would be a whole step next door, and slides as well. So trying to add in some slides, trying to add in some hammer-ons and pull-offs, that'll make a big difference, okay? So now all I'm going to do is still only go up and down, but I'm going to at least add in some hammer-ons, I'm going to add in some slides, some bends, and it's still just going to be stepwise motion, but already you're going to see the solo is slowly going to start sounding better and better, all right? 1, 2, 3. So, not bad, all right? It's still not quite where I want to be, but it's better than where we started, just going up and down. Now, the next step here is going to be adding in some chord tones from the D major chord. We're in the key of D mixolydian, all right? And the key of D mixolydian has a whole bunch of different chords in that key. If you want to know more about that concept, I really suggest you watch the video I made on the Lydian mode, where I go through how do you figure out the chords of the Lydian mode. Well, here you'd want to figure out what are the chords of the D mixolydian mode. And I'll just tell you right off the bat, the first chord in D mixolydian is the D major chord, okay? So the notes of a D major chord are extremely important. Those notes are D, F sharp, and A. And as a lead guitar player, I want to be highlighting those notes. And if I do, it'll help support this entire jam, all right? So those notes, D, F sharp, and A, I can find them all in my shape. Here's D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, A, D, and F sharp. So what I'm going to try and do now is everything that I did before, but instead I'm going to try and really make it a point to stop and to highlight and to hang out on this note, 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 and this note. All right, and just by doing that, I'm going to slow down a little bit, so I won't be doing so much
hanging out on the
16th
chord
notes,
tones.
But by hanging out on those notes, I'm going to really help define the fact that I am in the key of D something. Today I'm in D mixolydian, but even if I was in D major, I'd want to highlight the notes of this D major chord because that is my home chord. That's my home base. D major is the chord that everything revolves around. Okay, so let's take a listen to what this sounds like adding in the chord tones of D major. 1, 2, 3. So, by hanging out on those chord tones, even without a jam track, you can hear that hanging out on those notes kind of helps support and develop that idea that D major is my home chord, okay? But to be honest with you, the next step you really want to be thinking about not just the D chord, but the other chords in this jam. I mean, we've got a lot of chords in this jam. In this case specifically, there's 4 different chords. So really what you want to be thinking about as a lead guitar player is knowing where the chord tones are of every single chord. That seems like a lot of work, and it is. I'll be honest with you. When I'm improvising, I have to think pretty hard to keep track of where all my chord tones are, unless I'm lucky enough to just be able to hear it and kind of intuitively feel my way to it. But in this case, we can see very simply in my verse section, I have a D chord, then I have a C chord, and I have a G chord, and a D chord. So we already talked about the notes of a D chord. Let's really briefly talk about the notes of a C chord. We could find them all over our guitar, but I'm only going to look for these notes right here. Those notes are the notes C, E, and G from a C major chord. I also want to look for the notes of a G major chord, which are G, B, and D, and I can find some of those notes right here in my shape. So really what I'm going to do is I'm only going to look at this. Here's a note from D. Here's a note from the C chord. That's a C. And then here's a note from the G chord, B. And then we go back to a D chord, so I'll end on this note. So you see what I'm doing here is for each chord, I'm kind of finding a note that I want to highlight that is in that chord, because that's going to make me more melodic. Now I'm not just playing over these chord changes, I'm actually playing with the chord changes. And that makes a giant difference from the ear. It's every single chord will kind of lock in place a little bit tighter as opposed to you just kind of meandering over everything. All right? So let's listen to this one more time. I'm going to be basically doing everything from before, but now the notes I stop on will be directly related to the chord that's happening underneath it. Okay? And you should hear a difference in how this sounds. 1, 2, 3. All right, pretty melodic. Far more melodic than what we were doing before because every one of those notes actually complements the chord, okay? Now, improvising and doing that is going to take a lot of practice. You're going to have a lot of experience. But, I just want to kind of give you the anticipation of that, kind of look ahead that a lot of playing over the changes means being aware of what you're playing over. So when you're improvising, you don't really know the chord progression. You're kind of left just using your ear. And that's hard. So it's nice to have a jam track like this that you can practice along, you can prepare, you can kind of strategize how you're going to approach a few of those chords. I think that makes a big difference. So one of the last things I want to talk about here is the Mixolydian pentatonic scale. It's basically an abbreviated version of Mixolydian. The Mixolydian scale is pretty cool, and in my opinion, the most important notes of this scale are the root, the 3rd note of the scale, the 4th note of the scale, the 5th note of the scale, and that flat 7 note of the scale, all right? Those are really important notes, and there's actually a scale called Mixolydian pentatonic that's just that. It's a 1, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a flatted 7. 1, 3, 4, 5, flatted 7. So that shape is what I'm using right here, and you can hear all on its own. If you do some pentatonic patterns up and down, I did a video on pentatonic patterns. You can check that up, doing it down in 3s and up and down in 4s. It sounds great. I mean, it's just a wonderful sounding scale. And the way I see it is it's kind of like all the good parts of Mixolydian just wrapped up into a smaller shape. So I actually find it easier to improvise with, but it doesn't include the whole scale. So I wanted to show you that, and basically what I'm going to do now is I'll try and wrap everything together. One really quick note, one thing you should always do as a guitar player is learn to steal, okay? I mean that completely honestly. We talked about this in the David Gilmour lesson as well, just stealing from David Gilmour. John Petrucci from Dream Theater uses this Mixolydian pentatonic scale a lot, and one of the licks I learned from him was in the song Overture 1928. He does this lick that starts on the 2nd string, with the pinky right there. It is a bend right there. I actually use my ring finger. And I come down to this note on the 4th string, and then I come back to this note on the 3rd string. So that's a lick that I heard once in one song, and I kind of use it anytime I'm in Mixolydian because it's nice. So you'll hear me using that as well. I'll also be using all the other techniques as well and trying to accommodate those chords as I heard them. Now, this is improvised, and I am not anywhere near a perfect guitar player. I'll live the rest of my life and, still make mistakes when I'm playing. So you're probably going to hear some of those mistakes come through. But I'm going to be trying to do that whole feel it thing where I'm not worrying so much on what I'm doing. I'm kind of trying to let my ear guide me to where I want to go. That also means I will be leaving the shape. So even though everything I showed you was in this shape here today, or that Mixolydian pentatonic shape, when I'm just naturally improvising, I kind of want to leave shape. Sometimes I want to hit a note that's not in the shape, but it is in the scale, so I might slide to it or bend to it or maybe find it lower on the neck. So let's take a listen to what it sounds like if we wrap all these techniques together. 1, 2, 3. right, so, when you're improvising, you're never going to get, well, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get exactly what you're looking for. But I never get exactly what I'm looking for when I'm improvising. It's to me, improvising is great when you're just jamming with your friends and you're trying to write new ideas. Recording your improvised sessions can lead to a lot of really great ideas that you can then refine and turn into real songs. And, improvising is also a good place to start when you're writing a guitar solo. If you need to write a solo for a song and you don't know where to go, well, record yourself improvising over it a few times, and you'll probably come up with a bunch of good ideas that you can help refine into a guitar solo later on. All right? So hopefully this gives you a lot of good insight into how I at least approach improvising. And it's a very complicated process, and it is very intuitive. But it's very helpful to have some mechanical, systematic rules that you can, consult when you want to do something like this. Telling somebody to just feel it is like basically waving your hands and saying, oh, it's magic, and you can have that. A little bit of substance, a little bit of theory, a little bit of something to grasp onto where I was able to start acting intuitive on guitar and do
All key points, all important stuff. And that's where, again, he covers a lot of ground there, but it does go from very, very basic and very just scale and, sounds like scales essentially when it's starting, but then by the end, it's just very good solo sounds to me. I mean, I really like what I hear there. I hear something else going on with the audio, though. I think that's something else in my background here, probably.
Oh,
let me see.
I forgot to flip down.
There you are.
he makes some great points and tips throughout, like starting with the backing track. That's one you've mentioned many times. Having a jam track.
Yeah. Jam track is key. It's one of those big ones.
Practice and improvise on top of. If you have a jam track for every scale, then you can pretty much practice and improvise on every scale.
Yep. And that's one of the things that...
I like the approach he took, starting simple with just the straight up down just to get comfortable with the modal key he was playing in.
And get it into your ear, yeah.
Yeah, and then after you've got the flow going up and down, focusing on those pit stops, which, from what I was seeing...
The chord tones, yep.
Yeah, he was looking for the right notes to be the pit stops. They were the roots, or the thirds, or the fifths.
Yep. And in a lot of cases, it's picking one of those for the first chord, the root, the third, or the fifth, picking one of them, and then seeing, if you can get something that's a smooth, like a da-na-na, there's like a smooth transition of notes that isn't necessarily root, but maybe the root of this one, the fifth of the next one, and the third of the last one, so that those notes are all closer together, so that it's not jumping around as much as it is a cleaner line.
Yeah, and then from there, he went on to, once you've got some pit stops, now start thinking of hitting those on the chord changes to synchronize that solo to the progression. Otherwise, you get a messy solo if you're hitting those good notes, but you're not hitting them at the right chord change.
Yep. Got to have them at the right place, right time. Both important in music, for sure.
Yeah,
and the right feel is good, too.
It all comes back to timing.
Yep. Timing and feel.
But those are great suggestions for, like he said, improvising is the kind of thing that you may not write your song in that moment that you're improvising, but you might actually come up with songs or move out of the box that you're in towards new songs.
Yep. And that is key. Figuring out what's going on where.
Yeah,
and
you don't want to always be playing the same thing over and over again. It's like orchestral musicians or some of those who are trained to the point where all they do is play the scales and they go through the motions in the exercise, but they don't incorporate any of their own creativity into it. So they just master the instrument, but they're not actually writing. They're not actually doing that part of music. So
in some cases, they're fantastic musicians.
Yeah, they become great performers. They can play in the orchestra and do things that your average violinist can't do. But if you ask them to write a song, unless you give them sheet music, they can't play it.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot, actually. And I think a lot of that comes down to the way classical music is very much, or when you're doing classical or orchestral, it's very much specifically how to play this piece this way.
It's part
in the
orientated.
training.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's taking it from the paper and saying, okay, when the page says this, you play it this way. You know, if it has these symbols around the music, that means make it louder, make it softer, go faster, go slower. All these types of things are cues that you'll see in the sheet music, but they'll be able to all just look at a standard sheet of sheet music and get the same interpretation because they all have the same ideas of where it came from. But if you ask them to improvise, yeah, that's where it gets tricky, because if they haven't done those explorations on the instrument, and even what he was just doing now was all D Mixolydian. And again, for me, the way I would start looking at that on the piano is saying that D Mixolydian would be the fifth chord of which key, and it would be in the key of G. So we're dealing with all the white notes except F sharp. So we're just going D to D, but only using F sharp and all the other white notes. So it's not your standard D chord, but we're playing it based on G. So it's based on the key of G as like the home chord if you wanted to see what notes he's actually working with in D Mixolydian. But everything's focused on that D and focused on that D major, which has that F sharp right in the middle of it. But that's the only sharp, so everything else is all white notes. And as he's doing his improvising around, he's just going from that D, landing on that F sharp sometimes, landing on that A sometimes to get those landing spots that he talked about originally for focusing on those landings, to make it sound more melodic, because you can go up past it, and then go back and hang out on the 3, or you can go all the way up and hang back at the A. There's a bunch of different ways that you can go about it. But the main idea was focusing on those 3 chord tones, and then when you go into the the rest of the chords in the progression, one of them was a C, so you C, E, and G, and you're just figuring out which inversion feels right for whatever you're doing at the time, or wherever you're trying to go. If you're trying to make the sound all work its way up or work its way down, faster, slower, louder, softer, all those different variations you can do.
And you know what that reminds me? When you're thinking of the direction you want to go, the swell or the effect that you want of the notes that you're playing, always keep in mind like what conductors, when you're watching symphonies, a lot of people think that conductors are just up there waving a stick and not actually doing anything because they're not playing instruments. But those musicians in those scenarios, that conductor helps them with the improvisation and the expression more so than the sheet music in a lot of cases, because if you watch that conductor, he's doing a tempo thing with that stick for them. He's using his hands to like signal. It's like a guitarist looking at a drummer and holding his guitar up as the drummer's like ready to pound. The conductor
keep everybody on the same page.
Is kind of that signal to that entire group of musicians.
Exactly.
Think of the conductor in your head as you're writing your parts, and the more you think of what conductor would be doing to the part that you're playing, the more you'll start to feel your part in a motion way.
And it actually brings up an important point about all the different things. Like, let's say you're in one of your more complicated tracks. So let's say you've got 40 different things in there, 40 different sounds. You've got a triangle that only hits here. You've got this over here. You've got all these different things in your track. As that conductor, you don't always want the drums are not going to always be the loudest thing, or the bass is not always going to be the loudest thing throughout the track. Different things are going to float to the surface or bubble up to the surface so that you hear them more in the foreground, and then they'll kind of fade back into the background
and
together.
That's why you'll see them sometimes like point their hands in a direction and kind of like let those drummers know to pull back, because it's an acoustic mix that's going on there, not a digital one.
Yep. And making sure everybody's on the same page. Like, you guys are going to be chilling out, and then you are going to go loud, blah, blah, blah. And like,
now the violins.
Yep. And over
Where's
there,
the
there,
brass?
there. Yeah, exactly. So that's where, and it's fun to watch them to do that, to see how they play it. I always looked at it as the conductor is playing the orchestra. Like, that's their instrument. So it's like they're sitting at a keyboard at a piano, but each key of the piano is one of the people in one of the seats. And so they know that, everyone has their basic thing. They're all going to do the same thing on the same sheet music. They all know what's going on. But the conductor is basically calling out certain differences. It's almost like mixing and live live on stage, because you're saying, okay, I want to hear more of that violin. Instead of just having a mixing console and turning it up, you point at that violin and you say, you more. You can do things like that and bring individual instruments up or down, or like you said, any kind of change to the performance that you need to see, or that the conductor needs to see, because the conductor is the one performing the piece using the people and instruments in the orchestra. I always looked at it that way.
Yeah, and not all composers are necessarily conductors, but any good conductor has to be a composer, otherwise you can't really conduct properly.
You would think, yeah.
You
I
have
would think
to
for sure.
you have to have a grasp on that instrumentation and the part arrangements in order to deal with so many instruments.
And having the ear of a mixing engineer, essentially, where you can hear, because he's standing there live as the performance is going on. They've got to be able to hear that violin's too loud, or that oboe needs to come up, or whatever. Like, from all of that stuff happening all around them, right there in the moment, they have to be able to hear all that happening.
Yeah.
So it could be demanding on the ear as well. And
And
no cell phones in
sometimes-
the audience. No cell phones.
Sometimes they will rearrange parts, and they'll take a part that's normally for certain instruments and try them in other sections
Yeah.
just for the spice.
Yep. And I wonder how much they change things based on the venue also, knowing, what
Yeah.
that room is like, knowing if it'll be, if certain instruments would be too woofy or whatever based on the room, or if they would more treat the room to be,
Or you're dealing
aware
with
of
a
the
smaller
instruments.
orchestra. If this was written for a full orchestra and you've only got one of the smaller setups, you got to kind of compensate for some of those parts.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
It's like when a bassist starts backing up with rhythm guitar style techniques real high on the bass,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
just because
I
the
do like
part
that.
needs that sound more than it needs low at the moment.
And I do like throwing in a couple of high chords every now and then on the bass. Whether it's sometimes as a slide, like start from like the 5th fret and slide up to the 12th fret, and you get that chord, then you're going up to the 5th chord, so you can go from a 1 to a 5. Just knowing that adding 7 frets to something brings you from the 1 to the 5 is important, because that way you can just slide from here with 2 notes. I can do the root and then the 3rd an octave above. I'll do those 2 notes on the bass and slide from there up to the G, essentially. Doing the same thing. But slide up from one to the other, and you get that nice little.
You almost started the Louis Capaldi song there
Yeah.
with those 2 chords.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is how it starts. Ah, my God, yeah. You remembered it, huh? You did
Well,
that
that's-
from memory.
That's a 1, 5, 6, 4 right there, because that's
Yeah.
the 1 to the 5, to the 1 right above it, 6, and then the 4. And we're only hitting the root and the 3rd an octave above. So in this case, like you see, I'm only doing 2 notes at a time. And it's just remembering that again, since it's in,
See, and it really goes to show you a song doesn't have to be complicated to sound good. Because that Capaldi song, it's not a complex song. It's very easy to pick up and jump into, but it's so effective.
yeah. And as you said, it could be so many different songs as well. I mean, that in that particular style, and that's where somebody would hear that, and somebody else might hear a completely different song. Not that it's Jack and Diane, but somebody might be, oh, Jack and Diane, or somebody else might be, oh, that's Born in the USA, or whatever. Like, somebody will hear different songs from the same progression, even if it's not in the same key, just because they recognize that it goes from the intervals. They're recognizing that it goes from the 1 to the 5, whether they can call it that or not, articulate what it is. They just recognize that jump. And they say, oh, I recognize that from the song, and it's like, oh, I thought he was doing this song. Oh, I thought he was doing that song. But they could all be right, because we were doing all of those songs. It's just in the feel how it comes across.
Recognizing things in sound is the first half of the battle. Once you can recognize something in sound that you like, that you want to duplicate, one thing Jake said there, which I found funny, he's like, don't be afraid to steal.
Yeah.
It's funny that we use that word, and some people think like, oh, stealing music. When it comes to techniques, when it comes to progression, solos, like the way he was like saying, I like this little lick that Petrucci does, and I use it all the time in my solos because it's a technique, and this artist helped light that idea in this artist. And even though you could call it stealing, they're all deriving from techniques that go back to the dawn of the instrument.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's where, again, you can only patent so much, or like, so many different phrases. Like if you tried to say that any phrase that somebody has copywritten before, if you go to too short of a phrase, there'd be no more music to make because, take a phrase of 10 notes. There's a lot of different combinations of 10 notes that you can do, especially when you add space in there and everything else, thousands, tens of thousands, millions, billions. There's lots of combinations, but you would eventually run out.
Don't be afraid to steal progressions and chord arrangements, because these are not, artists can't own these things. They are part of the musical math, and they're meant to be stolen, so to speak. It's much different than, say, like, taking somebody's words and saying, oh, I'm going to write a song with those words. That's where, sometimes people get into musical stealing complications. But progressions, I can take a progression played on a guitar and play it on a piano the exact same way. It's not going to sound the same. It's not going to feel the same.
Exactly. And one of the things that I think it was James I was talking about the other day when we were talking about the circle of fifths, and he was talking about chord substitutions, and we were talking about borrowing chords from the section,
minors.
well, even the section just clockwise from where you are. So if you were dealing with C, F, and G as a 1, 4, and a 5, and you wanted to borrow, if you could borrow, let's say, the D, which is a little further over, and that's not normally in there because that F sharp, not normally in the key of C, but it doesn't sound wrong there because it's close by, but it does sound different. It's got a little bit of interest. And technically that F sharp is just going to be, it's going to make it sound like you're playing in C Lydian all of a sudden because you have that sharp 4 in there. But it's something you might not necessarily find. But the other reason that I think that stealing quote-unquote progressions is good, get the feel for them. You know that it was a good song, or that somebody made a song out of it that became popular, so that you know that the progression works. And you can go from there and throw in a progression or a substitution on one of the chords, and now it's a completely different thing. But it had the initial starting point. You started there, and just by making a small substitution, you can make it entirely your own, just with a small twist.
And that kind of leads to the whole discussion on to cover a song or to rearrange a song, to reimagine a song, because you can do both. I mean, covering a song is a great way to learn technique, to get a sound that's like a sound that you want to learn more about. Rearranging, re-envisioning a song allows you to take an original idea there and form your own creative interpretation of it. And when I hear covers that are reimagined, the best covers in the last 20 years are all reimaginations of the originals. Mad World is like my go-to. You hear the Cohen version versus the Tears for Fears version. They are different beasts derived from the same song.
Right. And again, it's just, you can, stealing, they're not necessarily saying take these, they're not saying to focus on getting all of your stuff from people that are already out there, but they are saying don't be afraid to take ideas that you like from things like that and try to incorporate them into what you're doing, or at least understand the mechanism that makes you like them so that you can replicate that idea elsewhere.
Yeah, the real key to not feeling like a thief there is give credit where credit's due. If you recognize, like, oh yeah, I wrote this song because I was influenced from this song or this artist, be humble. Say where influences come from. Say where sources come from. The only time people tend to have issue these days is when some artists seem to want to infer that, like, they did everything, they wrote everything, and they don't provide details for anything, with the hopes that, like, you'll just assume they wrote this masterpiece, even though it turns out like it's derived from something.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of credit where credit's due, and full transparency on if I did all the parts in this song, I'll say that I did all the parts in the song. Ones that I did that for example, were a couple of Grateful Dead songs where I would just take the song, put it on, play my bass along to it, and just try to record just the bass line.
Those are your jam tracks. That's like when you said I filled up my looper with 8 hours worth of jam tracks.
Yep, yep.
Those dead ones are
Yep.
a big chunk of that.
The dead ones are a big chunk of that. The other ones are ones that, like he was talking about, jam tracks where it's just an instrumental with a small, a simple structure, and the idea is to get comfortable with trying to solo over those. And I haven't used them that much, but they're loaded in there.
There's got to be some great resources out there for jam tracks for practice like this. We'll have to take a look at that for a future episode.
What I can suggest already is actually Bana jams. Joe Bonamassa. I'd never really listened to much Joe Bonamassa, and growing up and like having anything out there, like I haven't really investigated, I should say, a lot of his songs. But by seeing these jam tracks he put out, the high quality of the jam tracks, and the fact that it's him actually just removing his lead lines, and I think it was just Bana jams if you went onto YouTube. But the way it's laid out, and the fact that it'll, like, each chord as it's coming in just kind of like swings in from the side, and like you'll see, so he'll show you what chords to be doing, and it'll show you a roadmap of the guitar neck, saying that like you could be doing a solo in this key, or with this shape, or with this shape. And I actually took the audio from a couple of those, and I loaded those into the looper as well. But I have a couple of those jam tracks in my videos on my Dropbox, so that I can just, like, as a jam track, like, I can just be somewhere and just pop one of those on and just jam along to it.
See, resources like that really make it a lot easier for guitarists these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I was trying to play guitar in the 80s, there were no jam tracks. There weren't even, we were using Walkman amps to try to play, and slow down the solo to try to figure out what the hell Eddie was playing.
Mm-hmm. Let me see what I can find here.
Now you get visual cues, you get tracks preloaded for you to practice on top of.
Mm-hmm. And with each of the ones that I was looking at originally, they had again just showing you the exact roadmap of what you should be doing, like telling you which chord's coming, and then if you needed to switch, like now you're going to a solo section, and instead of being in D, you're going to go to the key of G or whatever. It'll show you the new roadmap and say, okay, now try soloing in this key, and so it just basically holds your hand and walks you through moving through different positions.
And practicing key changes. This is something, if you get good at it, sky's the limit for your music writing.
Changes right into the actual jam, so that you could just put the track on repeat and just sit there and work on whatever it is that you're working on, those positions. So he's just talking about it, but and then he starts to just kind of go into it and see what he's got the whole lesson on the YouTube. Quick here. Yeah, so in this case, this is Bana jam tracks, Bonamassa. And again, this is more him just going into what he's working on there. What I was trying to find is the spot in the lessons where he's more showing the actual jam.
Now,
what keys you should be. Yeah, this part. There you go. Like once you get to the actual part where this is where the backing track starts, and then it's just basically going to show you. I just want to show a few seconds of it going into like the different positions like this, and you can see the chords right there. Like right now they're in the key of G, showing you that you can play this position. Here are the 5 different pentatonic positions, D minor pentatonic, to play in the key of G if you just want to jam along.
I like this visual approach here. There's a couple of different tab sites out there that take this approach when you're learning your songs. It's very useful to watch the chords at the top like that as they roll along and see the tab.
Yep. And in this case, what I liked especially is the spacing, where you can see how like the distance from that F to the G is pretty far, right? And that B flat's kind of far, but then it's B flat C and then something else right there. So that's telling you that you're going to be doing a boom, 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 like a three chord really quick change. So even the spacing of the timing you can see coming, because it's basically running as a straight timeline. So
it's
something that's
like
farther away.
It's like looking at a staff and seeing 2 measures of whole notes.
And then again, this is showing D minor pentatonic, and then later on, you could still be doing D minor pentatonic the whole song. So they're basically just showing you, here's the roadmap you could be doing in D minor pentatonic, and these are all the chords that are going to be coming through as you're going through. And then you can download it and have the PDF of it. And again, just each of the songs that he has in this playlist. I think if you were to just look at the playlist, he had 4 Bana jam tracks, which was the search I did right there. You'd find a bunch of them, and any of them you could just throw it on there, and they'll give you here are the chords coming. So if you can play chords, if you're learning how to do your chords, it'll help you with getting them in your ear and getting the jumping from one chord to the next. And if you're doing soloing stuff, it's giving you a roadmap for pentatonic, so you can get a melody line happening. It's good stuff.
Oh, if he's offering bonus tracks like that to jam on top of, that is a great resource.
Yep.
Bless
And this
his
happens to be
soul.
Joe Bonamassa TV is the channel on here. And I'm not subscribed, but I am now. I had apparently downloaded it before, but did not subscribe.
Oh,
But that was
he's
just one that I jumped
He's
to.
constantly getting reference from other YouTube musicians.
Exactly. And we didn't need to go through the whole thing on that. It was more to get the idea across. But as far as also the quality of the jam track is, imagine the song, any of them, they're his songs that he's doing. On any of those, just imagine that you take his regular song, pull out the vocals, and pull out the lead guitar line, and that's basically all the the studio quality song, just minus those couple of tracks, so that you can fill those parts in yourself. Essentially, It's really good resource for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make your own jam tracks, that's awesome. But if you need to go find these kinds of resources, or what I was just thinking, some of those AI that we looked at last year, the song creator, those are other potential tools to build up a jam track. A jam track doesn't have to be anything complex. It's just something you want to be able to loop so that you can just go nuts on top of.
Well, even the what was the chord back we got? The unison chord back, I think it was.
Yeah.
Even something like that is perfect for that, because I mean, if you're 1 6 4 5, or you could just go through, like there were one that had 50 different chord progressions, and they're simple 3-chord or 4-chord progressions, but you could take those and just make that a practice session where you just pop one of them on and play for 3 minutes. Okay, then move to the next one and pop it on and play for 3 minutes. And again, it gets your ear accustomed to hearing what those changes sound like, so that you can identify, like you said, when I played that little progression a few minutes ago, and you're like, oh, you remembered that. It's like, well, as I heard it, it's just like, that's where it feels like I should go next, because I've heard that progression so many times.
You've been there before.
Yeah. Actually, that was probably.
Anytime that I'm, even if I'm in a scale that's new to me and that I don't typically play in, once I do feel that progression that I'm familiar with, the 5-1 or the 1-4-5, once I do get something that feels like home for me with that scale,
kind of get anchored there, yeah.
Yeah, that helps me to actually get comfortable with the scale.
Yep, exactly. And the one thing that kind of blew me away was thinking about things like looking at that D Mixolydian right there. It's different than D major, but if I was trying to figure that song out before I had a little bit more music theory to myself, and I didn't know about Mixolydian, and I was just thinking it's a D major, but some of the notes don't feel right, because D major, you normally have other sharps in there as well, because D major, C, G, D, you would normally have 2 sharps. So you'd have that C sharp in there. But in this case, D Mixolydian, that's not. So we're using the C natural instead of that C sharp. And it sounds weird when you're playing back-to-back like that. But when we were playing D Mixolydian before, it's mostly playing D major the whole time. But when you're doing the soloing, you're using that Mixolydian pentatonic you're talking, where he's doing the root 3, 4, 5. It kind of sounds cool, because normally you don't have that major third right there, and then the flat 7.
Is it ridiculous seeing that F as G flat, or is it seeing it as F sharp?
It's probably saying it G flat because I'm in C right now. If I told it instead, that's the issue.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you are in, because in the top left corner I see D. Oh, but no, I got it. It's the,
in this case, if I were to put it in G major, would be the way to go, because then D Mixolydian, all the notes, that F sharp looks normal, that C sharp looks normal, or sorry, the C flat or C natural looks normal, because everything looks natural, because technically these are all the notes of G major, because we're playing in D Mixolydian, because D is the 5th note of the G major scale.
Yeah, the only sharp you have there is the F.
Yep. and it shows up because it's on the staff, so it shows up as one sharp. And that's how I kind of fake it into working the way it's supposed to, the meticulous, by telling it, oh, give me all the notes of G major. But I could probably also just say, no, all that gets you for the root mode is major or minor. But technically I could pick, by faking it out essentially, and that way I can tell it it's G major, and that way I know it's the right notes for D mixolydian. Just by doing a little transposition there. But
It's funny that F sharp has been creeping into a couple of things I've been doing the last couple of weeks. Although
nice.
in a few of them, it's not an F sharp. It was
It's a G
actually
flat.
it was throwing me off because I didn't realize it until you had clued me in on that whole B C E F.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you really want to know whether that's a sharp or a flat, then decide what E and F is doing, or B and C.
Yep.
And what you're doing around it.
It's a good shortcut. Yeah, yeah.
And it turned out I was in G flat major, not
Yep.
D major.
I like that one. G flat major is a good one because that's basically, and the fact that it is G flat specifically is already like, if it was F sharp, that's the first sharp. So all of the keys that have a sharp in them have F sharp in them. But on the flat side, you don't get to G flat until you're already at 5 flats. So you don't get there until you're in the key of already B on the way around, or that would be the other side, coming around to the D flat and then in the G flat. They both have the 5 and then 6 flats going on. You get that C flat and the B flat. And that was what we talked about before with that, the BC and the EF.
These have been interesting scales to play with. They're helping me go in other directions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And like you said, the same song played in a slightly different key can sound totally different. And that's where that transpose button can be really useful. If the song that you're playing, like if something just doesn't feel like it's working quite right or doesn't have quite the right tone that you're looking for, you can always try to transpose up a key or two or down a key or two and see if it feels more natural there. And then you could work out how to play it normally in that key, as opposed to just doing the transpose and cheating and playing it the normal way you were playing it and having it sound like it's in a different key.
Yeah, and even with audio files these days, normally I'd say transpose with MIDI because the transposition's much cleaner. Mm-hmm. But even with an audio file, if you put it into BandLab and you set the initial key, because in your BandLab project you can set the key. Once you set that key, changing it afterwards means you will be transposing. So
it does ask though. When you go to change it, it'll say, do you want to change it? If you just say no, you're okay. But
it'll let you know it's going to modify the track. And one thing to keep in mind, the transposition is pretty amazing what they do with the audio file to do it. But it does stretch the file a little bit. So, if you transpose down a half step, that file becomes a little shorter to make that half step shift.
And the other thing about that
which
is
will
if you
fuck
do
up
bring
your
it down,
timing if you have other things that didn't transpose with it.
And if you do bring it down and you want to go back up, don't transpose it back up. Undo.
Yeah.
Go back.
Undo, because going down and then coming back, it will not come back exactly the same way
it's
was.
Recalculating twice. Yeah. It's like making copies of a copy, and things just get more and more distorted or problematic as you do.
What I suggest there is, rather than transpose the original track, duplicate the track. Transpose on the copy and see what it sounds like. Leave the original the way it is, because if you don't like what it does, then it's always nice to keep a copy of the original.
Yeah. Always something to go back to that way.
You don't have to worry about that with MIDI. The beauty of MIDI is you transpose in MIDI. All it does is basically just change the keynotes that the synthesizer is playing. But because MIDI is not sound, it does not affect the actual sound. It affects the note that you're hitting. When you are manipulating an actual audio file and you transpose, it's a stretch effect to make something go up or down in pitch.
For MIDI, the basically auditioning it in a different key is super easy because you can just highlight, you just like drag your mouse across, like grab the whole thing and just go like grab the whole phrase and slide it up. And as you slide it might even play it for you.
I've seen Jason do that just to figure out like what key he's in, or when he's doing some of his bass lines and he's punching them in, he'll just kind of slide up and down till he finds like, oh,
that's
okay,
the one.
That's the note.
Yep, exactly. And that's how that works. Like, and then again, auditioning the sound just by playing it and seeing what sounds right and figuring out, oh, that's the one I was looking for exactly right there.
And it works really fast. I mean, he narrows in just like you do when it's like 2, 3. You get close to where you want to be, move up, down just a little bit, and voila.
Little nudge.
There's the note.
That's the one. Yep. And you only got to be right once, and then you got like that one. And once you got it in there, you're good.
Once you get the first one, everything else falls into place.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's just, even if it takes a few seconds to fumble your way in, but that's, I think, that initial 5 seconds of discomfort, let's say, 5 seconds of, oh, I'm not sure if this is the key or not and trying to figure out where it is, that literal 5 seconds of trying to figure it out is what stops most of the classical musicians I was talking about before, the ones who have difficulty with improvisation. That 5 seconds of discomfort is something that they won't put themselves through because they don't realize that they're only 5 seconds away from totally knowing exactly what's going on.
Yeah. And a lot of the classical musicians, tend to be very mechanical, I guess would be the right word there. Some of them are just music machines. They can play what they see or what they're told to play, but if they're lost, they're not comfortable with that instrument anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or if you ask them to go into uncharted territory, like something they've never played before, like play me something in the style of Mozart that's not a Mozart piece you've played. Same thing, like with Nare, she'd be able to, at least she knows the things to incorporate. She could actually sit down and workshop her way through it and make a song that would have the elements that would sound like Mozart wrote it.
Yeah, well, she spent so much time analyzing what makes Mozart sound like Mozart.
Yep.
So
and those are some of the great ones.
It's much easier to simulate an artist or a composer if you really get into their brain. You really get into their creative thought process. Making a Bach piece, I did study the hell out of him as a kid. I can certainly write a Bach-like song.
Yep, exactly. And same thing goes with modern people as well. I mean, if you look at Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan or a certain person, if you wanted to follow their style of solos or what have you, you can just listen to a lot of their stuff and get a lot of those nuances into your playing.
Hey, Jerry, that guy that you showed me who does all that dead analysis, with the guitar techniques that they do.
Stitch method. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like he really went into the weeds to.
We're gonna highlight him for sure.
Figure out their styles.
Yep. He's another one for sure. One of the ones with him was...
You're on our list.
Yeah, you are. In the Mind of Jerry Garcia, I think was the title of the video. And he's definitely... Ian is his name. Stitch Method Guitar is the site, and we can check it out. I have it as one of my favorites. We'll have it again linked to the channel that we'll have here. It'll be one of the ones we add to our subscriptions from our channel that we have here as we link to useful resources.
I definitely want to find more resources that... go into style analysis, artist analysis. This is the part of artistic theory with YouTube that you didn't get a lot of this education in the old days. They would just teach you music theory and kind of leave you to go figure it out on your own. But now we have these wonderful resources, and you've got people who are really studying the artists.
Yeah, and it's about just kind of filling in the blanks or filling in what's missing from musical foundation, because not everybody got the same musical education. There's no standard, here is what you learn when you learn music. Like here's Music 101. If there was a book that was Music 101, that would be great to like put together something that's, whether even if it's a 100-hour course or something, right? But it's something where it's really getting into, once you've got this information solidly baked in, everything else is so much easier to work with because you have all this stuff already. You can already know, if I'm in the key of C and I want to do something, somebody says go to the 4, I know I'm going to the F, and I know which notes I'm using and things like that. Just little nuggets that could be very useful in situations where you're trying to play.
And if you were trying to teach somebody, say, to play like Jimi Hendrix, half of what you'd be explaining might be theory. Hendrix definitely had theory going on, but the other half of the explanation would actually be more the rule
Technique.
breaking. Like
And
the
technique, physical technique of how to make those sounds by doing this and doing that. They're not necessarily the way. It's not on the sheet music. If it just says play B, it doesn't say to play a B like what? It's like
yeah,
you have to
and
get that in there too.
today's guitarist might simulate his tone and the sound that he got through a amp simulator,
Mhm.
whereas if you really want to put yourself in the mind of Jimmy, you got to think about the equipment and things that he had at that time because that
Yep.
was part of his sound.
Yeah. And something that I just literally heard on the radio the other day when they were talking about Jimmy and just talking about him sitting there in the studio with the equipment, just playing for hours and hours and hours and trying different things out and getting these different sounds out of things through experimentation. And that's really where it comes down to is getting familiar with it and not being afraid to try things. When it comes to getting a new piece of gear, like not being afraid to try the knobs. I love when people get a new piece of gear and we sit down with it and they're like really curious about all the different, it's like, oh, it's got this, oh, it's got that. And they're like going into things and touching stuff. But I like when somebody gets a new thing and they're like, well, how do I, and like they're afraid to like even hit anything. It's like, no, try, like, do something, right? It's hard to mess these things up, really. Like you can
Yeah,
usually get back
especially
to a
with
solid
these,
state.
especially with these like guitar amp simulators and things like that. You go through the presets, find things that are close to what you like, and then go to the knobs and don't turn them all at once because if you do that, it's kind of hard to figure out what the hell you're really changing. If you change too many variables at the same time, you never know which variable is actually having the effect.
And if you
But
did fix it, you don't know what you did to fix it, so you won't be able to do it next time. So you don't get the reproducibility of the solution. So that's where, yeah, it's better to, okay, try this. Did that fix it? Okay, no. Try this. Okay. And it might be a combination of things that do it, but it's good to know what you just did, and you could walk yourself back through the steps if you need to
yeah.
undo it or if you need to reproduce it later.
Or just know the difference between 0 and 100 on that
Mm-hmm.
gain or that distortion knob. What's it sound like at 0? What's it sound like at 100? Now go
Yep.
to the middle and see where you want to be.
And on that exact note, I think right now we're probably getting a little bit less of the whoosh. There's probably still some whoosh going on, but most of the whoosh is probably gone because I turned the keyboard back off. But the difference there, I think, is that when I'm playing the bass or the guitar, the volume is just about right at this level. But when I'm playing the keyboard, I have to have it on like 1, and it's almost too loud. So
Yeah,
I
see,
think I just need to bring it
that
down when I go
signal
on there.
shouldn't be so hot. Yeah, we
Yeah,
should
exactly. It's just a matter. I
play
just have
around
to
with
turn it down at the board level, and then I have to turn it back up when I go back to the instrument, the guitar or the bass, because I'm not using any other pedals in the front of that. I'm just going straight from the instrument into the Mackie, and then into the line in on the PC.
Yeah, typically with my keyboards, I really try to stay at 50 to 75. My
Yep.
Roland, almost always at 75. The only reason why I would pull it back or push it up is just for a certain sound, a patch that might be a little too loud, I pull back a little bit. A piano that's a little too quiet, pull it up a little.
I do notice that in some of the gigs where like they'll sound check the keys, but they'll do it from just a regular piano sound, for example. But then there's one particular song where whatever patch it is that they switch to is just 30% louder for some reason, and it's and it just cuts right through, and it's like whoa.
And you can have the same problem with guitars.
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah.
guitar effects. When Joe was going through his not his line 6, but his Digitech, and he was
Right,
going
right.
through the different patches, and some patches would be loud, distorted, and other ones would be ambient and quiet, and the level and consistency is all over the place with an amp simulator.
Exactly. And that's where, again, I mean, same thing with the Line 6 that I have. It's like some of them, it happens to be a heavy distortion sound. So on the same bank, you have 4 that you can select. One's a super clean sound, so it's nice and, nice. You get the volume just right. You go to the next one, it's like, whoa, what just happened?
Blow
It's
my
like
head off.
it turned everything up to 15. Like, oh my God. It's like 10's okay, 11 maybe, but 15, that's right out. Let's not do that.
Well,
Because you can
one
blow
thing
things up that way.
one thing that Joe started doing was to organize the patches that that you would use, find the level differences, and sometimes you got to tweak them so that way if you're going to use these in a row or
Yeah.
these 2 patches in a song, you get them closer to each other so that way when you switch to them there isn't this abrupt change.
That's what I liked about with the Line 6 floor pod that I have there. It was from a while back, but you have like user settings also. So you have the ones that are built in, but then there's a whole bank, a whole nother set basically of the same number of ones that you could use as a user bank, where you could make your own banks, where you could say, okay, I like 31C right here, and then I want 21B over here, and I want 4A over here. And then once they're all in this bank, then you can set the individual levels, like you said, so that you get them so that they are consistent across the clean sound, the dirty sound, the lead sound was a little bit louder, but you can have it where your custom bank of those four, it's like, okay, when I go to that bank, I know that I've got my clean sound, my dirty sound, my phaser sound, and my lead sound, let's say.
And
be able to just do
for
that.
for a guitarist, I mean, like in the old days, four little pedals on the floor, or just a few. So like this, boom, I'm in my clean. Now I'm distorted. Now I'm phasered. You kind of want to make it that simple.
Yeah. And actually, even with my buddy Mike's rig, he tried to model it after what Trey Anastasia is using, but like replacing each piece with the piece of that style that he could afford, let's say, because you're not getting some of these pedals that he's got custom stuff in his rig and all that. But like in that rig, he's got 2 tube screamers, for example, and one of them is for just tone crafting, so that one of them's just on all the time, and it gets you part of that tone.
So
and then
one
when you
brings
want to
the
do a
heat.
lead. And then the other one is when you want to actually pop into, give that extra lift. If you're going into a solo, you don't have to use it all the time, but if you want to cut more, or you want to get that extra grit or the extra sound, then you kick that other one in, and then he's good. And then he also had another boost over, a boost pedal. He had a Digitech whammy. He had one that was a pitch shifter, so that you could like drop, you could do like dive bombs and things with that one.
Isn't it funny how so many of these effects that we've used are all about boosting signal?
Yeah.
I'd say like 80% of the effects, especially for guitars, tend to be signal boosters along with whatever effect that they're doing. But the main thing they're always doing is pushing the signal louder.
What I like is that I've worked with people on just the complete opposite ends of the spectrum on that, where some people, like the bass player who I've showed you pictures of his rig, where he had like 40 pedals on his bass rig to work in that 80s band, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's spectacular. It's got all kinds of options. It's got all kinds of different synthesizer stuff in there, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And then the other side of the coin there, the total minimalist, like Joey with his guitar playing, can get any tone that you need, but is almost always using just a guitar and an amp. There's almost never a pedal involved. He has a pedal or two he's got pedals that if he wanted to, he could break them out and use them, but he can get any of the tones or any of the sounds that you need just from the fingers and the settings on the guitar. So he'll know that, I want to go to this other song, and he's going to grab this other guitar and like dial in this much tone, this much volume, and he's going to pick up on here and a little bit harder, and then he can get exactly that tone that would normally be, that pedal, that amp simulator, but you're able to just get around it just using the actual techniques to make it happen.
Yeah, and when it comes to guitars, the minimalist approach, I think, is the smarter approach. If you're, if you're a stage guy, if you're spending most of your time on the stage playing that guitar, taking the minimalist approach makes more sense. You don't want to be dealing with like 19 pedals on the stage. It's cool to have them. It's complicated as hell to use them.
I've even seen people where, again, it introduces all that extra complexity. I've even seen people, like one of the rhythm guitar players, he only has, I think, 3 pedals in his setup. But he was having an issue
For
with the cable.
rhythm guitar, you shouldn't need that much.
Yeah, and he doesn't need that much, because and a lot of times he's, most of the time he's just singing and just, playing little chords here and there, but he's just supporting the sound with a little bit of rhythm guitar stuff, especially when the lead guitar player is playing leads, essentially. But a lot of times when he's singing, he's not even playing. But when he had an issue with one of his cables, and so they thought it was his wireless setup that was cutting out, but it was one of those little like 6-inch cables that goes from this pedal to this pedal.
Oh, the tiny ones.
The tiny ones. So
Connecting them.
Yeah, because there's
Those
a tiny one
don't
between these two
usually go
pedals.
bad. Like
They
the
don't
only
usually
time
go
those
bad.
are going to go bad is if you fuck with them.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is like the fact that they thought it was the problem with Pierce, so they changed to a regular cable, but they also touched something on the pedal board when they did it. I think they fixed it on the pedal board, so they just thought that it was, it was the wireless unit, but we'll talk about it next time, because I have, 5 or 6 of those little short ones, and I mentioned it to Mike when I saw it. I was like, that's one of the things that we should really have in the bag, is a couple of those extra little 6-inch, not that it's our responsibility to have little jumpers like that.
I have a garbage bag of little for keyboards. I went and bought like a 50 pack just to be able to patch bay.
For a patch bay, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
But
that's
you
getting
know,
into it though.
just like when it comes to too many variables and turning too many knobs at once, if you got too many pedals on the stage and you're getting a hum, but there's like
Yeah.
10 pedals where's the hum coming from?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot longer to isolate that chain than it would be if you got 2 or 3 pedals.
One of the other gigs, the guitar player, it was a wedding, and at the beginning we're just getting ready to do sound check and all that, and the guitar player, the main guitar player, realizes that his pedal board won't fire up. Like he's only got this, one power supply unit that supplies power to the whole board, and that unit, like he thought he was not getting power to the outlet, but we checked the outlet, because again, Mike's an electrician, so he's got the tester right there, and nope, outlet's good, and then okay, let's plug this in, okay, no, then we were about to like try to break the thing open and figure out what's going on. And at that point, though, we were that was the closest gig to Mike's house of any of them. Like most of the gigs were like 2 hours, 3 hours from where Mike is.
Mike ran home.
We could have, like, we offered, because this was like Mike was like, look, I'm 10 minutes away, and his pedal board has the same, power unit, so power supply unit. He's like, I could just run home and get it and come back, or he could send me to run to his house and get it and come back. But it actually started working, and even when it didn't work, he's like, no, it'll be okay, and I'm like, if you're used to using all these different sounds, you really want to be able to use these sounds. And if we have the option to just run 10 minutes and go get it and come back, we really should just do that,
And it's always nice if you have a backup piece of equipment, and it's the same equipment. Nothing sucks more than having to improvise with a crucial effect, like, oh, this is part of my sound, and damn.
But that is one thing that normally, that's part of like the instrument. From the instrument and the pedals and the amp, like that's usually the band's responsibility. Like usually we are, beyond that. We're like, once we get the microphone, the mic signal or the direct signal from there to the board, then it's us, right? But
well, that's why
the other
these
stuff
bands
isn't,
that's why these bands like going with you guys, though, because you're musicians too, and having those backup equipment and the understanding of the scenarios that they're going through, you guys could be like, okay, well, it's your responsibility, but Mike finds a way to try to cater to
make
the
it happen.
task. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm also like, I'm not a drummer, but I have a drum key in my bag. And so like, if a drummer's sitting there, he's like, oh, God damn it, I need to do this, but I didn't bring my drum key. And if I offer a drum key, they're like, why do you have a drum key? And it's like, because so many of you guys don't.
Isn't it funny how many drummers forget their fucking drum keys? That was a big thing back in
and
my
for me, it's
band
just
room days.
it's in the bottom of the bag. It's like I almost never use it or need it, but it's there. So like if ever there's a need for it, I can always go grab it. That's also one where the drum hardware sometimes is too tight. Like when you go to tighten things up, like the legs on the kick drum, a lot of times the people that have like the wing nut toggles, they'll like wing nut and they'll tighten it up real tight, and then they use it all night and they go to open it and they can't get it done. So they'll be like, Glenn, come here. So I'll go over and I'll break it for them. They're like, all right, there you go.
Yeah, it's one thing if they got a drum set up in a room and it's just staying there. Sure, you don't really have to mess with things too much, but if you are bringing drums to stage and then moving them, and you got to tune them.
Yep. And a lot of and the ones who get there early enough to do that stuff, that's always good. But other times, there's traffic, real world happens, people don't get out of work in time, whatever. But they might get there and not have enough time to do that much of a sound check. So it might just be get the kit set up and then get all the mics fastened as quick as you can, cabled up, and then okay, sound check, let's go. It's like get right
and
into
again, that's where it's useful having sound guys who are musicians who might be able to say tune a drum while that drummer's trying to help out the band with other things, or tune a guitar. Shit, not all guitarists set their equipment up themselves. They have assistants.
Yep, we've worked as guitar techs also with like being the guy who's hanging on to the acoustic, so they have to do at one point they had to switch back and forth between an acoustic and electric 5 times during the set.
Do
so.
that on camera.
Yeah, you saw me do that. That was down the shore. Yep, one of those on the basketball court. I want to say out on the beach. That was fun because like if I were to turn the camera like that way, we're looking at the bay, so you've got like water lapping in right there from where we were playing, and then if you go like 2 blocks that way, you're at the actual ocean, looking out of the Jersey Shore. So it was a cool spot. That was what's the name of that island? It'll come to me in a minute, but it's a tiny little island that's out there.
I'd like to play by the ocean, jamming by the ocean. I'd hate for my equipment to always be out there by the ocean.
Yeah.
The saltwater air and things like that.
Yeah.
You
It would
need
not be good.
You need a isolated studio, and you need to protect your equipment from that stuff.
Yep. Now, for me, I'm further north in Jersey, but I am still in New Jersey, and I mean, all my equipment's here, but my air conditioning is on like almost all the time, so like it's always very dry in here, so I don't have to worry about the humidity, and it's usually in the 68 to 75 range. It usually doesn't get hotter than 75, even if I have the ACs off while I'm out, and it usually
Yeah,
doesn't
you're like
get
the
colder
boy
than
in
68.
you're like the boy in the bubble with that
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. And it's a nice
equipment's-
small environment.
Your equipment's sterile.
Yeah, it's a nice small bubble, but that's why like the guitar will stay in tune. So like I'll not pick up the guitar for a week or two, and when I do pick it up and I go to tune it, it's like boom, oh perfect, boom, oh perfect. Like I'm looking down each string, I'm like, oh well there you go. But like right now it's been a little while, so I think it's a little bit out of tune. But I also haven't been able to find my tuner. I think my tuner went to the same place that my stylus went to. I think they both rolled behind this piano here. So I gotta
We're
go on
making
a
a
search.
run for it.
Yeah, I have to go on make a little search party and go see if I can find like half of my stuff. It's hiding. But that's one where when I do go to the studio over at Joey's house, I have my old tuner. So it's not one of the little snarks, but it's like an old like a rectangular one, and it's like it glows red when it's out.
The analog
Not quite. I mean, let's see. I'm gonna call it like early. It's not digital, but I would call it early digital because like, do you remember the first watches that had a face that was like it's like gray and like when the hands are animated, but like with black, display, whatever. It's almost like a display, but it's not really a display. It's hard to describe.
Hey,
but
it tunes, right? Like
it tunes,
yeah. Yeah, that's
it'll
all
show
that
you
matters
red if
with
it's
the
out of
tuner.
tune, and then it'll show you the little needle. But the needle itself is not an actual physical needle. It's like animated. So it's like you see the needle on the screen, and it's showing. Oh, there it is.
Oh man, the tuners with the needles. That's what my first one was like. I was trying to get it right to the middle.
Yep.
Hey, Latrell. Thank you.
It's happening.
Glad you like it.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Excellent. And that's the first tuner I was having was also I think it was a Boss maybe, or but it was one of those. It was like a big box, but it was like 2 AA's or whatever to run the thing.
All my pedals back then were Boss.
Might have been 9
or
volt,
DOD
actually,
before Boss.
There you go.
The DODs.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, let's see, for the tuners, I want to say, there's that one big one that I had, and then it was the rectangular one, and then we went to the Snarks after that. And the Snarks are great. I mean, I've always had good results with those.
The Snarks are the ones that you guys clip on the top. Yeah,
Yep.
that seems like such a, I never was exposed to those, but man, I would have definitely grabbed one of those when I was trying to play guitar.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I mean, you could even technically use those for a keyboard because it's based on a vibration, and it's not like, I mean, the body of the guitar or the bass definitely vibrates a lot, but if you were playing keyboard and you were playing it loud enough, you could just have that tuner sitting in front of it and it would receive enough to get the note. But you usually don't have to tune keyboards anyway because usually they're in tune and it's not going to change.
Would there be a way to use that with vocals?
In theory, yeah. Like I would take whatever
think
speaker.
One of the most useful things for singers, especially those who actually do want to learn to sing in pitch or in a targeted, like the ones who want to know what they're singing. Yeah, sing into a tuner and get familiar with the vibration that you're feeling as you see. Oh, I'm hitting the C. Get comfortable with the feeling there, and you will start to develop like the perfect pitch singing approach.
I'm trying to remember which person. It might have been.
A lot of singers don't really think about like what notes they're hitting. It's very rare on BandLab that I get a singer who actually knows the keys that they're singing.
Yeah, and I want to say it was Jake Zeke actually when we were looking at. He was showing us a song.
Jake would be aware.
He did know. Yeah, exactly, because he was, I think, showing us that on his vocal track, he would actually had a tuner on there to keep an eye on, whatever that was. And again, I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure it was him. But that was one of the first times I'd seen somebody do that, and I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. Just being aware of it, because if you weren't thinking about it, I mean, normally I'm going by ear. I'm thinking about what I'm hearing, because it could be that the guitar is a little bit flat or the bass is a little bit sharp, and I would be wanting to match the instruments that I'm hearing rather than going for a perfect tone. Like if I'm singing a perfect A, it doesn't matter if everybody in the band is just a little sharp, and like I should be playing a little bit sharp to match everybody in the band rather than trying to get that perfect tone just because that's where the tone should be.
And if
so
you
it's
can
more,
recognize,
it's more of a relative thing.
If you can recognize that I'm a half step off, then everything you do afterwards is a half step up, and you're on.
Yep. And that's something that you can do a little bit of cheating with that with guitar. If you're a little bit flat on the guitar, you can just bend slightly. It's not something you would want to do on like a fast line because then you're trying to play and bend as you're going, and that wouldn't be very good. But you
Well,
can
and
cheat where if you're a little flat, you can just kind of bend a little bit to get that back.
and when it comes to vocals, I guess they'd call the auto tune, the cheater these days, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, they're singing in this pitch, and the auto tune, because it's set to a scale, just moves the whole melody to match whatever it's referencing.
Yep. That does add a whole new level to it. And
Well,
basically
and it does add a
reinforces the
whole.
pitches.
It also adds a whole different kind of sound to vocal melody. So it's how we're always arguing. Like sometimes the auto tune, I'm just cringing and like, too
Yeah.
much auto
It's like
tune.
a nudge here and there, and using it as an effect, like old tape
Yeah.
effect, things like that. That's one thing. Having it on the entire track just because the person couldn't be bothered with hitting and holding pitches, that's different.
Yeah, if they're being dependent on the auto tune to hit their pitches versus they're just using it to sweeten certain notes that might have been off a little bit. The auto tune is something that if you want to be a serious singer, you don't want to get over dependent on it. It would be like expecting a guitarist to have an auto tuner to actually make all the notes sound right, and the guitarist, I don't care if I'm playing sloppy. Singers should have the same attitude. You want
I
to
will say-
learn to sing the pitch before you start to depend on the auto tune for anything. A good singing
I can see.
singer, the auto tune complements.
And I can see using the auto-tune in a rough draft track. So like sing the track and you're trying to get a feel for how it should be. You use the auto-tune to get those pitches right where they need to be, and then use that as your reference track and sing the part again and just get it to where you don't need the auto-tune now. You're just using that auto-tuned track to get you those right reference pitches into your ear.
Flesh out the melody. You
Right.
know, the
Exactly.
auto tune can help you flesh out that melody you're trying to achieve. And once you've got a grip on what you want to do, pull back the auto tune and listen to your tone.
Yep. And then, I mean, it's a lot of times you'll see people using autotune on like melisma. They're trying to do they're trying to do like a run like that, and they're trying to autotune it so it's jumping from tone to tone where it should be a smooth ride going up and down those tones. So that's kind of thing where I would just put like that couple of measures on repeat and just record it over and over and over again until I got something where I don't need the auto tune, but I actually sang it right. And even if it does mean just having to, a lot of people, they don't want to do little cuts like that because they want, I want it to be something I can do live on stage, so it has to be right as a one take or
Well,
one shot. And it's like, really, you should work on it though.
You know, if you're jumping with a melody and you're making big jumps, that's trickier for a beginning singer to
Oh, yeah.
get those big jumps. And with the auto tune approach, it almost makes it seem easy. Like I can jump from that A to that F auto tune much more seamlessly. But at the same time, if you want to become a better singer, you don't want to get over dependent on that technique because you're not learning to jump with your voice. Practice some scales, practice the triad, fifth kind of jumping with your voice, get comfortable with sliding your voice up and down, and then use the auto-tune. You can have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it doesn't always have to be auto-tune either. It can be the ones that you were using reference tracks. Like with a lot of the songs that Tony puts together here with MIDI tracks, he'll have a no vocal and a vocal, two different lines in there. And if there's one that says vocal, that means it'll have like a lead line. It'll have an instrument, like maybe a saxophone or a trumpet, playing the melody line for you. So it's telling you where the voice should be. So if you're listening along, you're hearing the vocals, or if you're reading the vocals, it helps you with the timing and the melody of those vocals. And if you use that as a reference, like you have that track on, so you go through, you sing, and that's actually helping your ear guide you to those points where you need to be. And then once you've got that, then you turn that back off now that you've got the vocal that's already following that line, and now you refine those individual parts of that vocal, and then you can really home in on a really good line there. But it's a great teaching technique to have that line there available so that people have that melody line.
When I started doing those remasters and I was doing the vocal, no vocal tracks, that's what I found is for a lot of the singers who were trying to improve their timing, and
Yeah.
it was helpful for those who were looking for timing and help on like certain parts and remembering, oh, when does he sing or when does, because sometimes you don't hear the music with vocals, and for some people they're like, oh, am I supposed to be singing on this part or not?
Timing on words is so tricky sometimes, just because you can break them in so many different ways. But if you're not familiar with the song, then it's really tricky. And I've seen people, especially with Grateful Dead songs, that was always a great one. Some of those songs have just such wacky
you
lyrics.
could have 20 minutes of solo.
Well, China Cat Sunflower was one in particular that the lyrics just absolutely make no sense. Like if you heard someone singing them to you, you'd be like, what? Like there's not a complete sentence in there that would make sense at all, because it's just jumbles of words, and I mean, it goes together beautifully and melodically, and it works great. But if you were just sitting there trying to read it, if you had the words in front of you and the song comes on and there's no vocal, lead line telling you what to do, you'd be like, and I've seen people try who are great singers, and they just have no idea what's going on. But the fact that I'm so familiar with the song, even though I can't necessarily hold the pitch that I need to get the line out the way I want, I totally have the timing down. So like if I'm listening to it, I can totally just, without even having the words in front of me, I could do the whole thing word for word all the way through with the timing. Now it's just focusing on the actual notes that I have to hit. That's where I have to follow that lead line, so I know exactly where the pitches that I'm trying to get to are. But if I'm playing along with them, then I'm right on. I can sing, like if I'm in the car listening to it, I'll be singing along with it every word, no problem.
And that's another good exercise singers should practice more is don't focus on the words. Think scat. Think
exactly.
Think musical styles where it's not about words, it's about sounds that you can make with your voice, and practice those techniques and then incorporate words into them, because a singer doesn't only have to be saying important words, and there's a part of it that can be real fun when you get into that kind of music style. Scat is a great one.
Absolutely. And actually, I was thinking about that literally yesterday, because I was telling you about that Bob Marley concert. I was watching a Bob Marley concert on YouTube for like the whole day. I just sat there like jamming along on the bass earlier in the day and then just had it on in the background later on. And there's at least a couple of those songs where Bob just goes off into a, beat out Bob, Bob, and just doing, no, total scat. And it's just, it's beautiful.
You'll see that kind of technique. You see it in rock, reggae, pop. I mean, Michael Jackson was just kind of squealing and doing all sorts of shit on top of the singing.
James Brown, another one that I love to throw on there, especially the instrumentals. The James Brown funky instrumentals is a great YouTube video that's, an hour, 2 hours of just a whole bunch of all instrumental stuff, but it's very funky. It's got bass lines that are just amazing. So for a bass warm-up, throw that on, and it'll help train your ear, because a lot of the songs are very simple in terms of chord structure. Like you're always in this key, or you're always going back and forth between these 2 or 3 keys. But the lines, it might be doom, 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 doo, doo, doom, ba, doo, ba, doom. So you're getting like timing. You got to get these fingers going. And when you start getting that stuff down, like you start rolling with that, and it's just like you're on board now, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, you got to investigate that stuff with the bass for sure.
Yeah, and as a singer, if you can incorporate that kind of stuff into your singing, that's what makes the greatest singers out there. They don't just sing words; they make noises. Their noises become part of their staple sound. You couldn't have Michael Jackson without the ee-hee-hee.
Yep. Or the James Brown without the ha.
Yeah. James owns that hockaloogie sound.
Exactly. But you always recognize it when you'd hear it. And that's where, again, the instrumentals I liked a lot, just because it wasn't so much focusing on vocals. I was really just trying to focus on the bass lines. And then this way, there weren't vocals getting in the way of me really focusing on the instrumentation. And, the bass was definitely highly featured in a lot of that stuff, because that's, some really danceable stuff. And the danceable stuff got some pretty active bass stuff happening, even if it is pretty simplistic in terms of the theory behind what's going on with the bass stuff. Even if you're only hanging out on 3 or 4 tones in that bass line, you're doing a good job of bouncing it.
Those times where you're singing and playing bass, are there any tricks or things that helped you to be able to play the instrument and sing at the same time?
Yeah, most of the time it would be to say I can't do that.
That's
But for
my
a lot of
go-to.
them, what I've started doing though now is like I've gotten to the point where it's a lot easier because I just try to put my hands on autopilot. Like it depends on the line and it depends on the timing of the
You
line
got to
and
pick.
how
You got to
contrasting
pick
they
the
are.
right song opportunity to
Yeah.
get comfortable with it. I have tried it a couple of times with very basic chord, slow chord songs where I can focus more on the singing. My
Yep.
hands are on auto drive.
Yep.
But like if if you really want to I want to be like Billy Joel style doing Piano Man. I just can't
Absolutely.
make my hands do that and make my
Well,
voice do that at the same time.
one exercise that I saw the other day was Chopin's favorite exercise, which I was mentioning to you, where they were playing it actually in E, or starting with his hands on the E instead of on the C. So instead of starting in what would normally be the first key that people would play in piano, it would be the C because it's the easiest with all the white notes. But in this case, he's doing it with starting on E, but having it so that the hand is more comfortable. And it doesn't sound necessarily as good. Like ending on the C, we were talking about that with the larger hand, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and C. But if I had a smaller hand, we'd use that B instead. But the hand just sits more naturally. Like you can't really see it too clearly. But I mean, with the thumb on that E and the pinky on the C, and then the three middle fingers on the black notes in the middle, they're more comfortable than they would be if I was trying to play all white notes where my hand
I
would be
don't
all
even
crunched down
have
here.
to try that to know I'd have a bitch of a time. Well, actually, wow, I can get to the C.
And even if you just go to the B. The idea was to start the practice with both hands and just try to be hitting the same notes at the same time, but by hitting the idea being that you're you're playing
And
your
that's
right
where
thumb.
you're going counter. That's where you're
Well,
going
this
counter.
if you need to, like that's what he was saying, is if it's more, if it's easier in your mind to do it counter where you're starting with the thumbs and working out, that's fine. But you can also do the same notes where you're just starting both on the E. But by doing it this way, what he mentioned specifically about this is you're matching your thumb, like a stronger finger, and your pinky from the other hand, and the idea is to get them to sound even. So as you're going back and forth through these exercises, you'll notice like if the higher ones are much louder, or if the lower ones are much louder, it depends on you want them to all be pretty even in how hard you're hitting them, and that way your right thumb and your left pinky are getting matched together, and your left thumb and your right pinky are getting matched together, so you'll be able to tell which one is hitting stronger or weaker.
See, I think that counter exercise, scale exercise, that I'm getting pretty comfortable with.
Nice. That's a good start. That's a better place to start from.
Right now I'm thinking like thumb, pointy, and
Yep.
parallel finger work is easy on my brain. Where my brain starts to explode is trying to treat my pinky on my left hand like I would my thumb on my right hand.
Exactly.
The fingers are different, and the way that I phrase or go up and down, very different between both hands, and I've never got them to synchronize in that way. That kind of parallel scale exercise where going up and down in unison on both hands is one that I really gotta. It's not one I want to do, but it is one I have to do.
Yeah, and that was one of the big ones. Like it was one of the things I hated about scales early on when I was taking piano lessons. But
I hate scale.
but I wasn't seeing it as you'll just have to kind of get your head wrapped around this, and we have to do this for a couple of months or a couple of years, to get around all of these scales and get them really comfortable under the fingers. But then after that, you can kind of forget about them all. But I was looking at it as this is going to be an endless string of these. Like this is going to be doing the same thing with these scales every week for the next 50 years and it just doesn't seem like that interesting. It was like, I want to play music. I don't want to have to just do it all day,
Every scale that I've gotten comfortable with, I needed a song. I needed something
Right.
to
A reason.
assimilate me into that scale. And in the old days, I would write specifically for certain scales because these were the ones that like my guitarist was using. These are the ones my band was playing in. So these were the scales that I wanted to own.
Yeah, having some go-to keys. For me, one of the ones lately has been Mixolydian, just like Jake was talking about right
I
here.
know. I hear Mixolydian every damn night. Oh, you should
I
play in
love
Mixolydian.
Mixolydian's a good one, and that's partly because I really just like the position, and I like the way it sounds, and I like the fact that it's different. It's got that slightly different sound than the major key, so that somebody who's used to just hearing major key stuff going up and down, they hear that Mixolydian's like, ooh, a little different. It's not very different, but it's a little different. So I like that. Just a little different. Maybe next time I'll be Dorian.
Well, hey, that Dorian one that we saw before.
Was that the epic dad rock, Dorian?
Yeah. That was off of.
I think that was also Jake. Yeah,
Yeah, that was definitely Jake's dad rock video.
that was great. Epic dad rock, Dorian style. And same idea, like for that, again, for the exploration of the modes, I try to relate everything, simplify everything. If I come back to C major, then for studying Dorian, it would be D Dorian. We would just be doing from D to D all the white notes. And that's the Dorian mode in the key of D.
See, and that feels more like something that would be for like a cartoon cinematics sound.
Mm-hmm. Because if you were to look at the major and the minor, and you think about how much happier major is than minor, in between major and minor are Dorian and Mixolydian. Because if you looked at C major, is all the white notes. C Mixolydian would have that B flat in there. C Dorian would have the, I guess, minor third, yeah, so it would have the E flat in there. C minor would have also the A flat.
Starts to get a little dark.
Yep, exactly.
The melodic shift starts to really shift.
Yep, because going from that first C major is all the white notes, then the Mixolydian has just the B flat, the Dorian has the B flat and the E flat, and then the Aeolian is the minor, and that has the A flat, the E flat, and the B flat. So you're going from 1 flat, 2 flats, 3 flats. It starts getting darker as you keep going down. And each of the modes, as you do go darker, you can still go beyond that even, getting down to Phrygian and Locrian and all that.
See, all those guys writing those cartoon musicals back in the 30s, 40s, 50s were utilizing a lot of these modal shifts and, traditional classical music, but they were adding this tension and melodic shifting of... and when you do that with strings and, orchestral instruments, and you put Bugs Bunny on top of it with Elmer Fudd hunting them, it works fantastic.
And even just adding dissonance, one that James, again, was showing us the other night, just a little bit of dissonance. You start with a note, and start adding half steps. And it sounds like we're going somewhere, but actually...
Hollywood has gone nuts with that stuff. I mean, there were a few classical composers that would take that approach. I'm thinking Magorsky, Night on Bald Mountain composer.
Mm-hmm.
He had some experimentation with that there.
Mm-hmm. One of the big ones I also like is using the one chord that's an asshole. Use that number 7. If you're playing in
once
C.
Once in a while, the asshole is the lead.
Yep. And if you use the fully diminished, you start adding. And that's just bouncing the B from the bottom to the top. And it sounds like you're playing kind of 2 different chords, but you can go back and forth with that, and that's like a very suspenseful or mysterious. That's also where, since it's diminished, you can just rock all the different inversions of that. Oops. All the right inversions of that.
Well, and you hear the effect of the chord progression going up and down, and with the melodic chord sounds that are going on there, it is like you're creeping through a dark forest, kind of.
Yep. And technically that is 4 different chords, because you would call those with the diminished, even though it's the same 4 notes, it's the D, D, F, A flat, and B. So basically, and then you rotate to the top. But This way it's a D diminished, then it's an F diminished, and then A flat diminished, and then a B diminished. So it's technically 4 different chords, but it's the same 4 notes, just going different inversions, going up and down, and that's why it sounds very connected. On a guitar, you would take the same claw and just move that same claw up every 3 frets at a time. So you'd go from that D up 3 frets to the F, and then up 3 frets to the A flat, 3 frets to the B, and 3 frets back to the D, and you just keep going. You're just going 3 frets at a time. Same claw, boom, 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 and you'll hear that move done a lot.
Oh,
in
Mr.
songs.
Sandman.
Could be anything like that, yeah. A lot of times it'll be in songs that have a lot of tension and release. Like that's one of the big tension builders. So like Fish, you'll see those kind of build-ups in Fish. Another one for good tension is the tritone, where you're just hitting a note and then the note that's between the 4 and the 5. So a C and then the F sharp. And that you would use that note if you were using an augmented chord, and that's where you would use a root, the major third, and that sharp 5. But we don't really use the augmented chords very much.
The augmented sharpens the 5th and
Sharpens the 5th. You're using a
3rd
root.
to the 4th and the 5th to the...
Nope, you're doing a root, a major third, and then instead of a regular 5, you're doing a sharp 5. Yep.
And diminished, half step down, diminished?
The diminished, the diminished is a little bit trickier because
or
if
is
you're
it the
only
third
doing...
that diminishes?
If you're doing a triad with a diminished, you're doing the root, the minor third, and a flat 5. And then if you were doing the full diminished, you're also doing that double flat 7, which turns into a 6. So that's where it gets confusing.
That freaky ass chord.
Yep. Because that in this case it would be C, E flat, G flat, and A. And then if you move that one up. But again, that would be the same thing would be the C diminished, the E flat diminished, the G flat diminished, and the A diminished are all the same notes.
This is another thing I'd like to hunt and see what's out there on YouTube. Studies of, these are the kinds of chords that don't get a lot of love, don't get a lot of use, but they are useful and they do serve a purpose. And I'm sure that like some of our resident geniuses out there on YouTube have analyzed the use of
one
that
in particular
in modern
is
music.
Jake.
Yeah.
Jake Lizio, because he's got one on his site here. Here are songs that actually use the Locrian mode or the 7th, the 7th chord. Here are songs that actually use the diminished. Yeah.
That's always the best way to really like see the usefulness of
To see how their
particular
composers
chords.
did. Yeah, absolutely.
Where am I gonna use this particular sound? Some of it I can already hear, like, oh, if I was writing a cartoon soundtrack, yes, I will jump up and down just like that. It's very animated in its sound, and it's more the melodic sound of it does give kind of tension and confusion and those kinds of things you want in soundtrack music.
Yep. And if we were to even just look at the different intervals, right? Like if we start saying root, 3rd, 5th, major 7, and then we just keep stacking from there. Like now we're in the key of C. So if we're just doing C, E, G, we keep going. D, F, those are all. That's the 7, the 9.
You
the
really
11,
hear
the
it when
13.
you hit that F, like
And the A above it. So that's that F would be the 11.
There's certain notes there as you're hitting them where, like I say, the untrained ear can even hear where pleasant, whoa.
What happened?
Pleasant.
There, yeah.
And it's not to say that one's unpleasant. It has an effect.
Yep. The other thing is that in a lot of cases, if you're playing those upper extensions, once you're getting past the 7 and you're starting to play the 9, the 11, and the 13, a lot of times you're leaving out some of the lower ones, so you're not playing all of them, right? So you're usually playing the root because that's important. You're usually going to leave out the 5 because that's the first one you can really drop conveniently. So you'll play the 3 though because you want to know if it's major or minor. So you got root, major, 3rd, let's say, and then let's say the 7 and the 9. So that's just using the C, the E, the B, and the D. And they'll call that a C major 9.
See, and that's like a reveal right there. That effect sounds like you just opened a box or discovered something.
And then if we leave the 9 out and just go with the 11, that F that you were talking about before.
the
you do
hell
the 9
did you
and the 11.
find in that box?
Or if you throw in the 13 now with that A.
See,
There's a
that's
couple different ways
that's almost soap opera-ish. You know, like you remember the old school soap operas back in the day? They had some great transition music. Like it's like that dun
I
dun
never really watched them much, but I
dun,
remember the music for sure.
well, yeah, a lot of times the transition music in it was that kind of
Yep, the who done it. The
yeah,
whodunit chord. Yeah.
or like soft elevator type of music as
Yeah, weird stuff like that at the end of some things. But it's also just about seeing which ones sound right like that. But you can also sharpen or flatten certain ones, right? So you could say, if you're looking at the Meticulous and seeing what it says, that's a C major 7, that's a C major 9, C11, C13. You wouldn't necessarily stack all
and you
those, like I
see
said,
how
leave
that
some out.
that flat really does like push to the
Oh wait, that one's only called a flat because I'm sitting there saying that I'm in
well,
D.
that particular note
Yeah.
really pushes to the last one.
Yep. Let me put that back in C because it's set for G major, so it's got that one. There you go. So it would be. So no sharps, no flats, just 13. So that was going the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13.
So that was the 11.
The 11
That
was
was
the F. Yep.
Yep.
And if you just play just that, it says C perfect fourth because it's the same as playing C and the F close together. But you're playing the F an octave higher.
It actually sounds nice against the root. It sounds distant. Like if you were just going to play those two notes, I could see that in like a march or a band, you know, a high school band kind of thing, and a lonely trumpet off there and on the 11th against the root.
The other funny thing is that you would see that same F in the C sus4, where you're just playing the C, the F, and the G. And it sounds kind of even better there.
Hey,
And that's the one where you would normally hear like the
sounds
sus4
pleasing.
and the sus2. That's where you're hitting the C and the G the whole time. And you're just going from the E to the F to the D. But if you throw that F up an octave, that's the 11. And again, probably it's the third that makes it sound ugly because it's right next to it with that E. But if you just left it with the root, the 7 and the 11, or the 9, kind of changes the character of it. So it depends on which ones you leave out.
I love how Meticulous shows that. Because when it comes to those 7s, 5ths, or augmented and 11s, seeing it in Meticulous, again, the visual association.
It helps so much, definitely. And even some of them, like I learn different ways of looking at the same notes because, you know, like C, G, and D, they're going to tell you it's a C sus2, which normally I would have it as the C and D together. But you can put that D on top.
Oh, that's the opening to Van Halen. We'll get higher. There you go.
Same thing. That's the sus4 and the
You know
sus2.
which one I'm talking about.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like, you know, it's only when I start playing, it's like, oh yeah, that one, it sounds kind of like this. It's got to be those notes there. And it kind of falls out of the hands like that.
Oh, I love
just little pieces.
I love when a sound like that snaps into a song that you can relate it to because, again, you realize like, oh, that's where that fits. That's where it works because it's been used there.
Yep. And in that case, that's a perfect lesson in using the sus4 and the sus2 to make a little melody line. And they would call that an enclosure around the 3 because you're basically... So you're just kind of... The whole idea is the D, E, and F right there. And landing on that E. Like the E is your home base and you're kind of teetering to the D and the F. And that just kind of makes that kind of roll around that little spot kind of cool.
Yeah, you'll get higher. Sammy said so.
That's right. And then, so does other people with What, Higher Love? Was that Steve Winwood?
Oh yeah.
There's more than a couple of songs talking about getting higher, for sure.
Well, I think Hagar really was talking about flying. That guy liked speed.
I can't drive 55. Yeah. No more speed, I'm almost there.
Yeah, and Eddie was really starting to experiment, with the more upbeat synth tracks and things like that. Jump got him going, but
The crowd goes wild.
or it could also be like ocean waves.
Oh, that's the seashore.
Yeah, throw some birds in there.
I was telling you about that rain I got the other night. I have a good 6-minute recording of rain in my car because it was like I was about to get out of the car. I went and got dinner, got back. It was pouring. I didn't have my raincoat. I was like, as I'm listening to the rain hitting the metal car and just bouncing off, I was like, I got to get a recording of this. So I just put my phone in the bracket up there and just opened up BandLab, hit record, sat back for like 5 minutes listening to it, and then just stopped it, left it. I'm going to use that as a background for one of the songs one of these days. Get a little bit of a Riders on the Storm feel going. Didn't have any lightning, but I definitely, you could hear the wind like buffeting rain against the car and waves and stuff.
Hey, if you that thunder and lightning sound that Riders of the Storm has, if you're in the middle of a storm with that, you might want to take cover.
Yeah. That was some good lightning. Some good thunder.
Yeah, that's one of those songs I did like analyze and study. When I do my remasters, I do like to, especially for ones like that, I like to get the same feel as what the original did. When I did Thriller, really, I was hunting around for the perfect samples.
Exactly. Because that's got to be right.
Well, yeah, if you don't do a song like that right, you'll piss some people off. It's like when Toto did Stairway to Heaven. They didn't do a bad version, but
they didn't do the version.
Yeah, and it's one of those songs that it's like sacrilegious when you do it wrong.
Yep. People come up and grab the neck in the guitar store. Like, nope. The forbidden riff, you may not.
Oh, that's a cool song.
Steel drum, actually.
See, and a sound like that can lend to some of this melodic feel that you get from some of these chord progressions. It's not just about the weird extensions and chord itself. Picking the right sound sometimes with that weird chord, that's part of the composition.
Definitely. Instrumentation. And being able to hear what it's going to sound like at the end, for sure. And orchestration and the way you compose, really. All of it kind of comes together with all that stuff.
Yeah, the more you start to see the whole composition, the more you'll start to realize, like, part of the conversation is this instrument, part of it is this instrument, but they're all kind of saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I will keep referencing like cartoon music because when you look at the 20th century and the most advanced composers out there, they were writing for Disney and Looney Tunes and
and I love that stuff. I mean, that's one of the things that, again, since I had so much classical music, classical piano music specifically, in my house growing up, that when in the cartoons, when they would have the classical music or the orchestral music coming in there, I was just so drawn to it already because I already loved that music.
Same
and so
here.
now you're throwing in cartoons as well. It's like, oh, this is two of my favorite things together. It's like, yes.
Two great tastes that taste great together.
Exactly. And some of my favorites, like, Tom and Jerry, were the ones where they do the piano scenes, are fantastic.
That is exactly the one that I was going to say. The episode
Either
where
the waltz
Tom's,
is one of them.
Tom's trying to get Jerry. Jerry's inside the piano, and he's hitting the keys, trying to hammer Jerry, and Jerry's just, like, making him hit the keys, which they synchronize so perfectly.
And then at one point, Jerry gets pissed off, so he like breaks off 2 hammers and just starts. That's it. And Tom's trying to keep up on the keyboard because he's doing a thing on stage. Fantastic stuff.
That episode and the one with Elmer Fudd where it was like an opera. Kill the rabbit.
The spear and magic helmet. My spear.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
magic
yeah.
helmet.
He's like a little Viking, and
I think they call it the Barber of Seville. Yeah.
It is one of my
that's
all-time.
another fantastic one. Also with Tom and Jerry though, the waltz. There was one where like Tom learned to play piano, like the cat learned to waltz and the mouse liked to dance, and then every time he would like it was part of the same one I think, but they had a couple of them where he was in the piano, and even there was one where I remember with Tom with a zoot suit, and they had like the like doing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he had the little tails, like when he would sit down at the piano and he'd poof his tails out.
Yep, exactly. Trying to impress the little lady cat. Tom and Jerry, fun stuff. I mean, I'm just a big cartoon fan. You know, I'm just a big kid, really. But
and it went to show like you didn't have to have any dialogue. You know, with these characters, they didn't talk, so the music spoke for the characters, and it
the pictures
did a very effective job.
And a lot of times, like a thought bubble, and they'll just have something in the thought bubble that'll like it'll represent the idea. It doesn't have to be words or whatever. But when he like the dog Spike, you make a fool out of him, and in his head all of a sudden he sees a picture of a donkey. He's a jackass. He's like they pulled one over on me.
And Spike had a little buddy, didn't he?
Oh yeah. He did. Like the one was like the little, I called him a little yippy dog, but the one would be like, hey Spike, hey Spike, hey Spike. He's like always bouncing around.
What are we gonna do today, Spike? Shut up.
Exactly. And then with Tom and all the other cats in the alley, seeing Tom like living the easy life up there, and all the alley cats making fun of him. Oh yeah, with Tom I could go through all like 50 Tom and Jerry episodes. I love them so much.
It's been so long since I've gotten, because they really have cut those out of. I think Itchy and Scratchy with The Simpsons kind of fucked Tom and Jerry up, because now you never see them anywhere, and they are still, to me,
there's Tom and Jerry movie that
best
came
examples.
Tom and Jerry movie came out not too long ago, and I saw that.
Oh, that's right. There was a movie.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who was in it too. I was going to say Alicia Silverstone, but it's not. What was her name? It'll come to me in a minute. But definitely some people that you would recognize in the movie. It was fun. But again, it was it's live action and cartoon mixed together, so it's that whole mixed thing going on.
Yeah, today's animation, if they do take that traditional approach with the music, I wish I would see more animation doing that. I feel like today's animation, they're going for modern music, they're radio music, they're trying to incorporate. You watch Japanese anime, it's very metalish and rock, and a lot of the kids' cartoons, even Adult Swim stuff, the music is based off of the music you'd be hearing on the radio. I haven't seen any animation really that takes that traditional classical orchestra approach. Not in the last decade or so.
Nice to see you, Kenty.
Oh, we're rude. We're rude, Glenn.
Yeah. I get that all the time.
Well,
but actually,
I'm glad you hate it.
Yeah, we were going to play another song actually from
I don't hate you.
No, nothing but love, man. Nothing but love. But we had another one from Nare Soul, and this one was about playing Autumn Leaves in the style of 10 classical composers. So this is another one where she goes into, taking a song, in this case it's a jazz standard, and trying to reimagine it in the way of classical composers and looking at it from there. So we can check that one out if you want to check that one more.
Yeah, I was actually wondering her jazz experience, because after classical, she seems to really have it going on there.
Absolutely. And again, this is from Nare Soul's page, and let's see what we have here. Let me know if the volume is good. I think I've got it about half. A little more, let's see.
So I'm a classically trained pianist composer. Composers would have done if they were given to a famous jazz tune like Autumn Leaves. This is the best attempt at finding an answer to this question, so please enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. A very special thank you to my supporters on Patreon. If you're interested in this type of exploration with me, please subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.
Oh, I am interested, and I am subscribed.
Absolutely.
I love that glass variation she was doing.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, in all of the variations, I love all the styles and just how different they sound, even with the same structure and the same chords. It's great to see how much like a chameleon she can be to play in all those different styles.
Yeah.
Believably, and it just sounds like a split personality or a different person entirely playing, and all the different things that she's doing and how well she's highlighting each of those things that are characteristic of the style. I love that.
Yeah, in the middle when she was going through like these tempo changes to change the style of it, I realized like that's what a lot of the Russian composers, in the late 1900s and the 20th century, that's what a lot of them were doing. They were taking that traditional classical approach and then throwing in speedy swings that gave those Russian composers sound. Like they all had a unified kind of composing. It's why we reference Russian composers, because there's like 5 or 6 of them who all just blew up at the same time doing this kind of genre variating with classical music.
And even just seeing some of the things that she calls out in the styles there, like ornamentation, like just little like ornamentation, or springy doodad upwards, like doodle doodle doodle. It's like things that aren't necessarily, it's not an arpeggio, it's not necessarily a lick, but it's just a doodad. It's just something to get you to go up there.
If you think of it like from a cooking perspective, it's like the sprinkles, it's the sweetening, little bit of sauce, that spice.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that,
And
Excellent.
it's funny to like, I was hearing jazz techniques in there that I guess jazz does kind of derive from some of that early 20th century composition.
Now, some of what she was using were things like jazz turnaround. The 2-5-1 is one of the most recognizable things you'll hear in jazz. Is a 2-5-1 turnaround where you're doing a minor 2, dominant 5, major 1. When you're doing a little, like your ear will hear it, like da da da, like you'll hear. If it was coming around in, let's say, in the key of C, coming around, you'd be doing that D minor to the. So you'd hear it pulling. I mean, steel drum isn't the best sound for that, let's say, but from the piano, like a D minor. So you're going from that minor 2 to the 5 to the 1. In that case, since we're not using 7 chords, I was just using a major, so it was just basically just going from a D minor, G major, C major. But that's 2-5-1, and that's one of the common endings or turnarounds you'll hear in jazz. There's also places where she used like a chord where she was using a 1, but it was a 6-4 chord, and that's another kind of thing that you'll see extended chords like that in jazz more than you'll see them in rock, for example. But things like that can really give a jazzy sound to otherwise regular sounding stuff.
Yeah. Part of getting to the jazz sound is chord construction, for sure. and then, the other half of it with jazz is the improv variation, bouncing around that they do is really part of that genre's strength.
Yeah.
Of all the genres, a musician who can play jazz is the one who can improvise the most.
Yeah, and just watching her technique in how she played all of those, like those little, the ornamentations, the fast chromatic lines, the arpeggiating up and down, the playing big octaves together. I mean, she's got her chops down for sure. I mean, watching that is a pleasure.
She must have started like right out the womb. Give me a keyboard.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I wouldn't be surprised if she's, playing every instrument.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't surprise me either. And
Yeah,
that's one
when you're studying classical the way she is, wouldn't be surprised if she can handle a bow, keys, and everything in between.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So it's a good visit to Nare's page, and we also visited again with our buddy Jake Lizio from Signal Studio. We'll be enjoying, or are we jumping into other channels and trying to get other connections for our channel so that we have other things as a resource to bring you to on YouTube, because there's just tons of stuff. So we're going to have lots and lots of connections from our channel so that we have lots of places to go to.
There's a whole world of information over there on that YouTube.
Yeah. It's
And
just a
we're
matter
hunting. We're
it's all on
hunting
the
rabbits.
on the interwebs, got to get out there and get the stuff. Just figure out what everything all is.
That's what you kids call it these days.
Exactly.
Well, that was a
But-
great exploration. I was looking forward to the Nari Soul clips.
Yep. And that's not the end of it. I mean, I'm sure we'll be hitting more of those clips later because there's so many good, again, technique things and knowledge things and theory things to go through that we'll be revisiting her page again. There's a lot of other people we need to get to, but we'll be coming back to her for sure. Just like with Jake. Coming back to both for
Yep.
sure.
And for any of you out there, I'm going to put into the chat here our band lab. IT. There it is.
Yep. That's
guys
3 H's. 3 H's in
Want
there.
to follow us over there, and that's going to be our band lab account for this show. And
For the show.
that'll be a good place to interact. If you have questions or you want to see something on one of these shows, send us a message.
Yep. We'll check it out and we'll let you know. And in the meantime, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. It's always a pleasure, Tony.
Oh, I love it.
And we'll be getting back again next week to talk some more IT.
I got to
with Glenn
sample
and Tony.
Ange. I got to sample Ange and get her in there.
Yep. With all the balloon deflating. See you guys next time. Have a good one.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for the jam.
Always.